Chapter 720. After bypassing the 10 extremes formation, I quickly returned to my previous position. I looked up and saw that the 3 celestial masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain were still there. Wu Yu was nowhere to be seen. At this moment, the 3 celestial masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain were focused on the coffin-like zither case that was floating in the air. Outside the zither case, a white illusory zither shadow was on the verge of collapse, struggling to break free from the suction force in the zither case. The 3 celestial masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain sent their true essence to the zither case at the same time, continuing to increase the suction force of the zither case. When he got closer, he saw that Wu Yu's body had been sucked into the zither case, but the zither case shadow that she summoned with her hands was still outside the case. For some reason, she had already dedicated herself to the zither case, but she was trying her best to keep the zither shadow outside. At this moment, the old celestial master of Dragon Tiger Mountain, Li Chuanxiu, spoke. He sighed with a hint of pity on his face. Wu Yu, why are you doing this? You should know that the Fushi zither is the treasure of Dragon Tiger Mountain. No matter what, the entire Dragon Tiger Mountain has to complete its zither soul so that the divine artifact can shine again. As the zither soul, you shouldn't stop this. After he finished speaking, the Taoist expression was very solemn. He immediately said, That's right, the Fushi zither is the treasure of Dragon Tiger Mountain. As the zither soul, you belong to Dragon Tiger Mountain. Why are you so stubborn? Just like the usual style of Dragon Tiger Mountain, Daozi's face was full of righteousness when he said this. Unfortunately, Wu Yu, who was in the zither case, did not appreciate it. She scolded coldly. Daozi once told me that life's troubles begin with literacy. When I was born from the Fushi zither, I had consciousness, but I didn't have any thoughts at that time. It wasn't until I met the Taoist that I had thoughts and even feelings. From then on, I had a worry in my heart that has been bothering me ever since. Why am I the zither soul? Wu Yu was controlling the white zither shadow that was on the verge of collapse. Her body had begun to blur, but her voice was very clear and firm. She continued, I don't want to be the zither soul, or rather, I don't want to just be the zither soul. That's why I left Dragon Tiger Mountain with the Taoist. From that day onwards, Wu Yu was Wu Yu, no longer the zither soul. At this moment, the young Taoist in front of him suddenly interrupted. Nonsense! You were born from the Fushi zither. To you, the Fushi zither is like a parent. If you don't become the soul of the zither, you will be humiliating your mother and killing your father. Under his angry rebuke, Wu Yu was silent for a moment, then he laughed out loud. You're right, Fushi Qin is indeed my parents, but so what? It gave birth to me, so it wants to imprison me inside forever? Wu Yu's voice was very cold as he continued. Besides, what does this have to do with your Dragon Tiger Mountain? Daozi's face was full of anger. Just as he was about to answer, Wu Yu seemed to not want to listen at all. He suddenly continued. In ancient times, there was Neza who caused trouble in the sea. He cut his flesh to return to his mother and removed his bones to return to his father. From then on, there was no more connection. Since the Fushi zither gave birth to Wu Yue, then today, Wu Yue will return the Fushi zither soul to the Fushi zither. Hearing this, Daozi did not react for a moment. He thought that Wu Yu would no longer resist and said in surprise, You finally understand? Then you. Before he could finish his sentence, Wu Yu suddenly let out a painful howl, causing my heart to tremble. I didn't know what was happening, so I hurriedly gathered the true essence in my body and sped up. When I walked in front of them, I raised my eyes and looked into the zither case. Only then did I realize that Wu Yu had let go of one of his hands. He was only using one hand to control the image of the zither in midair. His released hand was stretched to his other arm, forcefully tearing at the bright, white lines connecting his arm to the image of the zither. I didn't know what these lines were, but Wu Yu had only torn one, and his entire figure had dimmed. At the same time, he let out an even more painful scream than before. Before I could understand what was happening, Li Chuanxiu's expression changed drastically. He shouted, Wu Yu, you can't do this. You are the soul of the Fushi zither. Tearing these soul veins is no different from suicide. After he spoke, Wu Yu's scream stopped. A moment later, she gritted her teeth and supported the image of the zither outside the zither case. She moved her lips and said weakly, "No, Wu Yu is just Wu Yu, not the soul of the Fushi zither. It's just like humans. His flesh and blood are bestowed by his parents." I heard that in the story, Neza cut off his arms and stomach, gouged out his intestines and bones, and returned it to his parents. It's a pity that Wu Yu doesn't have a body of flesh and blood, so he can't cut off his arms and stomach, gouge out his intestines and bones. He can only sever this zither soul from himself. From then on, he will only be a pure Wu Yu. As her feeble voice faded away, she pulled at her left wrist with her right hand again, and another soul vein was severed. This time, Wu Yu didn't even have much strength to scream, and his body became even more illusory. However, his eyes shone brightly, and he continued with a trembling voice. "Once I sever all my soul meridians, Wu Yu will only be a strand of soul, and I won't be the soul of the Fushi zither anymore. Even if you imprison me in the Fushi zither forever, this divine artifact won't be able to emit any more light." After saying that, she opened her mouth as if she wanted to laugh, but she didn't have the strength to do so. I was still confused, but I vaguely knew what Wu Yu was thinking, so I was extremely anxious. Just like me, the three heavenly masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain were also anxious, especially the Taoist. He was so anxious that he had already stopped pouring true essence into the zither case. He walked around anxiously, but he seemed to be helpless against Wu Yu's actions. Of course, they were different from me worrying about Wu Yu. They might only be worried about the Fushi zither. Just like what Wu Yu had said, she had severed her soul vein, and the Fushi zither soul had disappeared. Even if Wu Yu was imprisoned in the Fushi zither forever, it wouldn't be able to make the Fushi zither shine again. Looking at Wu Yu's actions and listening to her words, I didn't know why, but I actually faintly supported her actions. But very quickly, this thought flashed through my mind. At this moment, we were already in Chiyo's skull tomb. Wu Yu's husband, the Taoist, had yet to disperse. He should be anxiously waiting for Wu Yu ahead. Wu Yu had been waiting outside the tomb for 100 years. The two of them were about to meet. So how could Wu Yu give up halfway? Also, just like what the heavenly masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain had said, Wu Yu was the Fushi zither soul. If she completely cut off her connection with the Fushi zither soul, would she immediately disappear? Didn't Najah, who had wreaked havoc in the East Sea, lose his life after cutting off his flesh and bones? Thinking of this, while the three people of Dragon Tiger Mountain were still in a daze, I quickly ran to the zither case and raised my head to shout at Wu Yu, "Senior, you don't have to do this. Taoist is still waiting for you ahead. Now that the fatty has activated the 10 terminal formation, come with me. As long as we get rid of the people of Dragon Tiger Mountain, we can enter the cave ahead and meet Senior Taoist." The three heavenly masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain finally noticed me, but in their eyes, Wu Yu was obviously more important. After hearing what I said, not only did they not pay attention to me, they even nodded in agreement, especially the old Li Chuanxiu, who said loudly to Wu Yu in unison, "That's right, Wu Yu. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think about Taoist back then." Taoist. A faint smile appeared on Wu Yu's illusory face as she softly muttered the two words Taoist. After repeating it a few times, she turned to look at me and said, "Thank you for your help along the way, Mr. Zhou. However, Mr. Zhou, you don't have to persuade me. I've already seen Taoist's soul, and I've already comforted myself. What's more, even without Taoist's existence, Wu Yu has long wanted to cut off her flesh and bones and only be herself." After saying that, she looked at me in a daze, and a smile appeared on her illusory face. She continued, "Mr. Zhou, if you can continue forward, when you see my husband, please bring him a message for me. Just say, Wu Yu can't be with him for a lifetime, but she will miss him for a lifetime. If there's a next life for a remnant soul like Wu Yu, she'll definitely marry him like an ordinary couple." Chapter 721. No, Wu Yu was obviously tired of her identity. A second ago, she was still muttering softly, and in the next second, she decisively tore off her soul. I couldn't react at all. I could only reach out and shout, but I couldn't stop her movements. At the same time I shouted, an even louder voice came from the side. "How dare you?" This sharp voice came from the Taoist who was holding the sword case. However, it was obvious that the voice couldn't stop Wu Yu's movements. Therefore, the Taoist and I immediately leaped up at the same time and flew toward Wu Yu. The Taoist of Mount Longhu naturally had extraordinary cultivation, and his speed wasn't slower than mine. He arrived in front of Wu Yu at the same time as me, but he didn't move toward Wu Yu in the sword case. Instead, he turned around and pounced at the spot where the phantom of the zither had dissipated. Like a wind demon, he grabbed everywhere, as if he wanted to grab the dissipated Fushi zither's soul back. While he was acting like a crazy demon, I pounced next to the zither case. Although Wu Yu's body was extremely dim, I could still vaguely see a trace of her appearance. I didn't dare to reach out to touch her, so I could only float next to the zither case and shout at her, "Senior Wu Yu, how can you do this? Senior Taoist is still waiting ahead. Although you were born from the Fushi zither, since you already have spiritual consciousness, Wu Yu is Wu Yu. Why do you need to prove it?" After saying so much in one breath, I felt that something was wrong. I didn't have time to reprimand her and quickly asked, "Senior, what should I do to save you?" Wu Yu's phantom looked at me. Her mouth moved, but she couldn't make a sound. After a moment, the corners of her mouth suddenly curled up into a smile. She didn't open her mouth again, but shook her head at me. Although I couldn't hear her voice, I instantly understood. She meant that there was no way to save her, and she didn't regret her previous actions at all. I was very anxious. Although Wu Yu and I had only met by chance and entered Chiyo's tomb, I couldn't tell if she was helping me or using me. However, along the way, we had helped each other and could be considered friends. Moreover, the relationship between her and Taoist was very similar to Lao AI and I. Listening to her story these days, I kept thinking about Lao AI. Over the past few days, I'd been trying my best to help Wu Yu. The story between him and Daozi was a tragedy. I wanted to do my best to help them reverse this tragedy, but who knew that in the end, it would still end like this? Since their story was so, what about me and Lao AI? Was this the only way? The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself down and quickly thought of a way to deal with it. At this moment, Wu Yu is already a remnant soul. The most direct way to prevent her from dissipating was to find a place for her to stay and protect her remnant soul so that it would not dissipate. Only then would there be enough time to think of a way to help her recover. However, looking at Wu Yu's current situation, it was obvious that she wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Where should I go to find her shelter? How would I have a time to look for it? I was anxious, Tong and Tong. Tong, she. Lao, I. Thinking about this, my eyes brightened. I hurriedly took the jade bracelet off my chest and carefully handed it over, touching Wu Yu's soul. When I let Tong take possession of me, I just needed to touch her with the jade bracelet. However, this method didn't work this time. After I put the jade bracelet over, Wu Yu's figure became dimmer, but it didn't disappear like Tong. It was obvious that the jade bracelet didn't work. I was anxious and hurried to summon Tong. Do you know what's going on? Although Tong lived in the jade bracelet, she could sense what was happening outside. Thus, she knew what was going on. After she came out, she looked sad and shook her head at me. Brother, the jade bracelet can only rely on its own power to enter. Sister Wu Yu doesn't have any power. That's why she can't enter the jade bracelet. As she spoke, tears began to fall from her eyes. She was extremely sad, just like how I thought of Lao AI and me when I saw Wu Yu and Taoist. Tong looked at Wu Yu and thought of herself. I sighed and held Tong, asking her to return to the jade bracelet. After Tong nodded obediently and disappeared, I angrily punched the side of the zither case. I felt indescribable frustration and helplessness in my heart. Today, it was just Wu Yu. If Lao AI appeared in front of me in the future, would I be like today? I could only watch without being able to do anything. with Lao AIs and my identity. And with all the clues I had come into contact with, this worry wasn't groundless. Living in a cruel world, there was no lack of cruel facts. One day, when such cruelty befell you, you would truly know how insignificant and powerless you were. At this moment, it was just like when I had watched my parents die in front of me. I desired power, power that could disregard life and death. I looked up at Wu Yu, who was almost transparent, and sighed deeply. Since things had come to this, I couldn't do anything. Just as I was about to tell her that I would definitely bring her last words to Taoist, a voice suddenly rang in my head. "Kid, don't give up yet." Hearing this voice, I was stunned at first, but immediately reacted. It was Strip Armor. After he had helped me force Lu Zhenyang to retreat, I had been worried about Wu Yu and didn't have the time to care about him. That sword strike must have used up the power of Strip Armor. At this moment, his voice sounded weak and old, and there was a hint of hesitation. Without waiting for my response, he continued, "This Guqin spirit is an infatuated person. If you want to save her, it's not impossible." Originally, I was still silent, but when I heard Strip Armor, I immediately quivered and quickly asked him, "What method?" Strip Armor sighed and continued, "She was born from Fushi's Guqin spirit. After her connection with Fushi's Guqin spirit was severed, she became a rootless duckweed and will definitely die. If you want to save her, you need a heaven-defying item to have a chance." A heaven-defying item? I had a glimmer of hope in my heart, but it immediately dissipated. Don't talk about a heaven-defying item. Even if I were to get a ladle of water from the Yellow River, I wouldn't be able to make it in time. Moreover, Wu Yu couldn't wait. Strip Armor continued, "This heaven-defying item is just a general term. For example, the Fushi Guqin that gave birth to Wu Yu, or the Xin Yuan sword that you have, can be considered as heaven-defying items." What? I was instantly surprised. The Xin Yuan sword works too? How can I save her? Like a ray of light at dawn, I quickly took out the Xin Yuan sword and waited for Strip Armor's answer. At this moment, Strip Armor seemed to be hesitating. After a moment of silence, he replied, "This spirit was born from Fushi Guqin, and it has a trace of the godly weapon's power. Now that its soul is severed, it means that the godly weapon's power has been stripped away, which is why it lost its life. You only need to keep it in the Xin Yuan sword and use the Xin Yuan sword's godly weapon's power to help her reconstruct her soul, thus saving her life." But, speaking to this point, Strip Armor hesitated and didn't continue. I was anxious and couldn't wait any longer, so I interrupted him and asked, "What should I do to keep her in the Xin Yuan sword?" With this interruption, Strip Armor didn't continue but replied, "You don't need to do anything. You just need to put the Xin Yuan sword on her soul." Hearing this, I didn't delay any further and immediately placed the Xin Yuan sword next to Wu Yu. The Xin Yuan sword itself had an extremely sharp aura. It didn't need to be activated at all. When it got close to a person, sword energy would be generated. With Wu Yu's current state, she wouldn't be able to withstand it, so I carefully moved the Xin Yuan sword closer to her, afraid that I would hurt her. When her almost transparent body touched the Xin Yuan sword, she disappeared completely in the blink of an eye. I was stunned and quickly tried to sense the Xin Yuan sword, but I didn't find anything. Only then did I ask Strip Armor, "Did you keep her?" The sound of Strip Armor was heard. "That's right. She's injured too badly this time and won't wake up for a while. But don't worry, with the power of the Xin Yuan sword, she will be safe." After a pause, he continued, "Kid, I've used up too much of my spiritual sense and can't hold on any longer. I'm going to fall into a deep sleep soon. You have to remember the sword I used just now. It will be beneficial if you study it more." At this point, the sound of Strip Armor disappeared. I let out a sigh of relief. Although it was dangerous, the outcome wasn't too bad. At least Wu Yu's life was saved, so I had nothing to worry about. I floated down from the sky and met the gazes of the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu. Chapter 722. When I saw the gazes of the three heavenly masters, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't know if the greed in their eyes was due to Wu Yue or the Xin Yuan sword, but no matter what it was, it wasn't a good thing. With my cultivation, I couldn't deal with the three of them. I could only rely on the fatty's formation. So after I landed, I didn't wait any longer. I directly leaped and ran towards a fatty. Seeing my movements, the three of them reacted and chased after me. There was even a sharp voice shouting at me, "Brat, don't go." I didn't need to turn my head to know that it was the young Taoist's voice. I had dealt with the people of Mount Longhu more than once or twice. Only a fool wouldn't run at this time. Not only did I not stop, but I also sped up. My body rapidly moved forward, getting closer and closer to the 10 extreme formation that the fatty had arranged. Although the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu had a higher cultivation than me, they couldn't catch up to me in such a short time. When I reached the side of the 10 extreme formation, the fastest Taoist was only 10 meters behind me. When he saw me stop, his eyes brightened, and he immediately chased after me again. But at this time, the 10 extreme formation in front of me flashed, creating a gap for me to pass through. The three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu were blocked outside. When I was fighting with Lu Jinyang earlier, the Zhen Yuan in my body had been completely exhausted. The sprint just now had made me even more tired. Only now did I relax. I sat on the ground and gasped for breath. After a while, my breathing calmed down. I didn't dare stay in the same place any longer, so I got up and continued to move forward. I wanted to find a fatty inside the formation. Although I was already in the range of the 10 extreme formation, it was made of 81 bronze statues. It occupied a large area, and with the bronze statues blocking the way, I couldn't see anything inside the formation. While absorbing the true dragon energy, I impatiently moved forward. After searching for 5 or 6 minutes, I couldn't find the fatty. I couldn't even find a path to the center of the formation. No matter how I moved forward, I felt that I had returned to the same place after a while. I gradually became impatient and used the power of clarity to look forward. I thought that I could easily break the illusion, but unexpectedly, the power of clarity was useless. I still couldn't see anything in the surroundings. Generally speaking, formations are used to confuse people's minds. However, with my cultivation, ordinary formations are useless against me. Even some rare, illusionary formations can't be resisted by the power of insight. However, this formation in front of me has completely baffled me. I stopped walking and was about to take out a sound, transmitting talisman to contact the fatty. At that moment, the two bronze giants in front of me moved to the left and right. The other bronze statue walked in front of me. The fatty was sitting on the neck of the bronze statue. He looked down at me and asked, "Third baby, how are you? Are you injured? Where's Senior Wu Yue?" This fellow was in the 10-terminal formation and had been dealing with Lu Jinyang, so he didn't know about Wu Yue's situation. I let out a breath. Just as I was about to tell him, the fatty raised his hand. There was an inexplicable buoyancy under my feet, and I flew up to the shoulder of the statue next to him. After I stabilized myself on the shoulder of the bronze statue, the fatty looked at me and grinned. He looked very pleased with himself. The 10-terminal formation was really magical. The fatty controlled it like an extension of his arm. It was no wonder that he was so pleased. I nodded at him. "I'm not injured, but Wu Yue's situation is a little troublesome." I briefly explained what had happened. Then, I raised the Xian Yuan sword in my hand and told him that Wu Yue was in the Xian Yuan sword and was being nourished by the power of the divine weapon. It was uncertain whether he could recover or not. After listening to my story, the fatty's eyes opened wide. After a while, he said in shock, "This Senior Wu Yue is really unyielding. He's really admirable." "Yeah," I nodded emotionally. Wu Yue looked gentle and weak. Who would have thought that he would be so unyielding and resolute? After I was done lamenting, I quickly collected my thoughts and asked the fatty, "How are things on your side? Is Lu Jinyang still in the formation?" The fatty nodded and said, "This guy is really good at stirring up trouble. Actually, I noticed you when you walked into the formation, but I was held back by him. It wasn't easy for me to use the power of the formation to temporarily trap him in one place. However, he shouldn't be trapped for long. He's going to cause trouble again." After saying that, he continued with regret, It's a pity that I can only set up the 10-terminal formation like this for now. If I study it for a few days and set up the 10-terminal formation with the power we encountered before, even if Lu Xingyang was 10 times stronger, I would still be able to kill him with the power of the formation. Right now, I can only trap him at most. Although he was very dissatisfied with the power of the formation in front of him, to me, it was already very incredible. One had to know that the fatty was only at the early stage of the Seal Heaven Master realm, while Lu Xingyang was at the Yang Spirit realm. Moreover, he had Chiyo's inheritance and held Chiyo's battle axe. His strength was many levels higher than the fatty's. Even so, he was still trapped by the formation. This showed the power of the 10-terminal formation. The fatty was always joking about other things, but when it came to formations, he was very serious, so I didn't continue this topic. Instead, I said to him, now that Lu Xingyang's people from Mount Longhu are trapped in the formation, let's hurry up and continue forward. I promised Weiyue that I would help her find Daozi's soul and bring him out. After hearing what I said, the fatty nodded. There's only one cave left in front of us. Later, I'll control the formation and send you directly to the stone path. You can enter the cave if you take a few steps forward. His words stunned me, so I asked, what about you? The fatty chuckled. Didn't I tell you just now? I'm still a little unfamiliar with this formation. Not only is its power much weaker, but it also can't operate on its own. It needs someone to control it. After you enter the cave, I'll control the formation to guard here. I guarantee that Lu Xingyang and the 3 celestial masters from Mount Longhu will be locked inside and won't let them chase after you and cause trouble. I frowned and couldn't make up my mind. I naturally couldn't rest assured leaving the fatty here to deal with Lu Xingyang and the 3 celestial masters from Mount Longhu. However, if I went forward with him and the formation couldn't operate, what should we do if Lu Xingyang and the 3 celestial masters from Mount Longhu chased after us? There weren't any huge bronze statues in front of us that the fatty could use to set up the 10-terminal formation. While I was still silent and couldn't make up my mind, the fatty waved his hand and said, all right, third baby, you should hurry up and go. This 10-terminal formation is very mysterious. Under my control, I can move through the formation at will. Although Lu Xingyang and the few celestial masters from Mount Longhu are powerful, they can't do anything in this formation no matter how strong their cultivation is. They aren't my match, so you don't have to worry. After saying that, as if to prove his point, the fatty chuckled. A ripple of light flowed in front of him and his figure disappeared. Before I could react, he suddenly appeared in front of me. He really did look extraordinary. Only then did I relax. Just as I was about to speak, the fatty waved his hand. Immediately after, the giant's body sank and I was sent flying. When I stood up, I realized that I was already on the bluestone path that led to the cave in front of me. I didn't rush forward, but turned around to look behind me. This place was naturally within the range of the 10-terminal formation. There were several bronze statues constantly moving around, but the fatty's figure had already disappeared. After a few seconds of silence, I turned around to look at the cave in front of me. I had a plan in mind. Although the fatty spoke casually, I knew that it wouldn't be easy for him to control the 10-terminal formation. There would definitely be danger. However, the fatty had already sent me here. If I went back now, I would be letting down his painstaking efforts. I could only hurry into the cave and find the second half of the death scripture before finding Daozi's soul and bringing it out. Only then would I not let down the fatty's painstaking efforts. Chapter 723. The fatty's situation was critical, so I couldn't delay any longer. I had to enter the cave as fast as I could to get the second volume of the Death Scripture and find Daozi's spirit. Then, I would quickly come out and meet up with the fatty. Only then would I be able to protect the fatty. With that in mind, I used all of the Jin Qi that I had just recovered and used my fastest speed to climb up the bluestone path. After a short while, I reached the entrance of the cave. After arriving here, I heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at the bottom of the mountain. On the fatty's side, the huge bronze statues were constantly colliding with each other as the formation revolved, creating rumbling sounds. The three heavenly masters from Mount Longhu were still fine, as they were trapped in the formation and had to deal with 2 bronze statues each. Although they weren't in a dangerous situation, they didn't have much power to retaliate. On the other hand, Lu Jinyang didn't look like he had just been injured. Instead, he charged into a large group of bronze statues and fought with them with his fists and kicks. It was an exaggerated and shocking scene. Moreover, from the looks of it, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage even if he was surrounded by a dozen bronze statues. This made me even more worried, but since I had already come this far, I couldn't turn back. Thus, I gritted my teeth and turned to enter the cave. Previously, when we were climbing the sacred mountain at Chiyo's Shoulder Shin Tomb, we had encountered the 6 Paths Gate that was created by the thunder and water trigram. Using this analogy, this cave should be similar to the 6 Paths Gate, which was also where Chiyu had left his inheritance. There shouldn't be too much danger. Moreover, the situation was urgent, so I didn't have to be too cautious. After entering the cave, I immediately lifted my foot and continued forward. After walking for a few hundred meters, the path in front of me took a turn. Suddenly, the view in front of me widened and changed into a huge space. I lifted my head to take a closer look and was instantly amazed. The decorations here were exactly as I had imagined. There wasn't any blood mist lingering around, nor was there a trace of darkness. Instead, it was a dazzling sight. I saw a floating island floating in the endless darkness. On the floating island, there was an ancient palace made of jade. In front of the entrance, there were dozens of floating stone slabs. They rose up from the end of the palace and floated through the void to where I was standing. I was startled to see a floating ancient palace in the middle of the darkness. If it weren't for the evil aura in the darkness, I would have thought that this was a fairyland. I couldn't wait any longer on the fatty's side. Thus, I observed for a while before stepping onto the mystic space stone and walking onto the floating path. The stone slab floated in the air, swaying slightly. However, it did not give off a feeling of instability. Instead, it gave off a comfortable feeling like a boat floating in the wind on a lake. As I walked up the stairs, it was a peaceful journey. Not long after, I arrived at the entrance of the Jade Palace. Although the palace was on the floating island, when I stepped on it, it was extremely stable, as if I was walking on flat ground. There wasn't even the slightest swaying from before. As for the Jade Palace in front of me, when I stood below and looked at the floating island from afar, I felt that the palace wasn't big. However, when I walked in front of it and lifted my head to look, I realized that the palace's door was 3 to 4 meters tall. It was grand and exquisite, similar to the Fire God Temple. However, there was no plaque above the door, nor were there any words. I looked at it for a while and tried to push the door. When my finger touched the jade door, it felt warm and cold. I didn't use any strength, and the jade door was slowly pushed open, but there was no sound. After the 2 jade doors were completely opened, I stuck my head in to take a look. I didn't see any buildings, but rows of corridors and painted walls. I stepped over the threshold and walked into the corridor. I looked around and felt that it was even more beautiful and extraordinary. The surrounding jade walls were carved with countless flowers, birds, and beasts. I could recognize some of them, but there were others that I had never heard of before. However, all of the carvings were vivid and lifelike. As I walked forward, it was as if they had come to life, running and playing on the jade walls. It was very lively. After passing through the jade wall corridor, a house finally appeared in front of me. However, compared to the beautiful outside, the inside was very ordinary. There were only 2 rooms in front of me. The door on the left was closed, so I couldn't see what was inside. The door on the right was wide open, and it looked like a study room. There were jade tables, chairs, and bookshelves. It looked simple and ancient, and the furnishings were very simple. My main goal in coming here was to find the 2nd volume of the Death Scripture. Seeing the bookshelf, my heart was naturally moved, so I first walked into the room. However, after I entered, I looked around for a long time. Other than the table, chairs, and bookshelves, there was nothing, let alone the 2nd volume of the Death Scripture. I quickly confirmed that there was nothing in this room, so I didn't stay any longer and turned to search the other room. I pushed open the door, and the furnishings in the other room were even simpler. There was only a jade bed, and besides a jade pillow, there was nothing else. It seemed to be a living room. Since I didn't find anything in the two rooms, I started to feel anxious. I didn't know how long the fatty could hold on. The longer I stayed here, the more danger he would face. If the fatty couldn't hold on, Lu Jinyang and the people of Mount Longhu would rush here. At that time, it would be wishful thinking for me to obtain the second volume of the Death Scripture and find the Taoist soul. I was very anxious, but I forced myself to calm down. Since Lao AI said that the second volume of the Death Scripture was here, he couldn't have lied to me. The only possibility was that it was hidden somewhere, and I just hadn't found it yet. I searched the two rooms again. After confirming that it couldn't be here, I walked out of the room and looked around. This place was beautiful and ingenious, but the furnishings were very simple. Other than the rooms, there was only the jade walls in the corridor that could hide something. Thus, I quickly focused my attention on the jade walls. It didn't take long for me to discover something strange. Flowers, birds, and beasts were swimming on the jade walls around the ancient hall. Only the jade wall facing the door was very quiet. Not only that, but the patterns on it were also messy. It looked different from the other places. Looking at the messy patterns, I stretched my hand and gently slid it. At first, I just wanted to give it a try, but after I slid it, the patterns moved along with my finger. I was elated as I understood what was going on. Although the patterns were messy, they were originally complete. I just needed to move them and put them together. I carefully observed for a while. There were only 9 patterns in total, and they weren't complicated. After thinking for a while, I slid them one by one until they formed a complete pattern. It was the pattern of a single-horned bull's head. The bull's horns were protruding, and it was very similar to the Kuei bull altar that we had set up. After I finished putting them together, there was still no movement. However, I noticed that the Kuei bull's horns were slightly protruding. My mind flickered. I reached out and gently pressed on the wall. Immediately, all the flowers, birds, and beasts on the jade walls stopped moving. Seeing that there was a chance, I increased the strength of my hand until I heard a crisp crack. Only then did I stop. I retracted my hand. After the cracking sound, the birds and beasts on the wall moved again. They seemed to be afraid of something and ran back to their homes. The tired birds returned to their nests, and the beasts hid in their caves. There were so many animals hiding in just a blink of an eye. This scene was even more shocking than a fast-forward scene in a movie. I looked at the scene in a daze. As the animals on the wall disappeared, the jade wall in front of me also moved. The Kuei bull's head, which I had just put together, kept sinking until it sank into the floor of the hall. That was when the thing behind it was revealed. It was an altar made of countless ox skulls. It looked somewhat similar to Wu Yue's Kuei ox altar, but it was much smaller. A huge head floated above the altar. Its eyes were empty, but it made people shudder. In the mouth of the head, there was a palm-sized black wooden box floating up and down with the head. Chapter 724. It had been a long and arduous journey. Now that I had finally seen what I had been looking for, it was inevitable that my heart would be excited. I took a deep breath and extended my hand. Just as I was about to take the wooden box to take a look, a ray of black light shot out from the nostrils of the cow skull. Then a voice rang out, "Stop!" My movements paused, and I turned my head to look. The black light had already flown in front of me and transformed into a figure wearing a black robe. It was Daozi, who I had met in the blood maple forest. After shouting at me to stop, Daozi gently cupped his hands at me and explained, "This item is very strange. It will be dangerous to touch it rashly. Just now I saw Mr. reaching out to take it. In a moment of desperation, I offended you. I hope Mr. can forgive me." Seeing Daozi, I instantly remembered what had happened to Wu Yue. I didn't know how to tell him. After a moment of awkwardness, I returned the greeting. "Thank you for reminding me, mister. May I know how dangerous this item is?" Daozi was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "I don't know how dangerous it is, but when I got the news from Celestial Master Zhang, I searched all the way to this place. Although I encountered some dangers along the way, I was safe in the end. It wasn't until I found this item that all kinds of dangers came. First, I was inexplicably lost in this jade hall. It took me many years to get out. After that, I was besieged by endless blood fiends in the blood maple forest. In the end, I failed at the last step and lost my life in the blood maple forest. Even my young spirit couldn't escape, and I ended up in this situation. Speaking of his own experience of death, Daozi's tone was still calm, as if his emotions hadn't fluctuated. However, after he finished speaking, his voice trembled slightly. After a moment of silence, he continued, "Later, when I woke up again, I was back in this jade hall. This wooden box was brought back to its original position by someone, and I was imprisoned around this wooden box, unable to escape for eternity. At the same time, I also had the opportunity to continue studying the contents of the wooden box. At first, I didn't understand what was inside, but later on, I gradually understood a lot. However, the more I understood, the more terrified I became. The contents of the box were far beyond my imagination. Although he was already a Yin soul, Daozi's body was extremely solid and looked no different from an ordinary person. Speaking of this, his pupils suddenly shrank a few times with obvious panic. I didn't know what he saw in the wooden box, but I was certain that inside the wooden box was the second volume of the death scripture that Bayan had mentioned. Therefore, I didn't pay too much attention to his words. Instead, I hesitantly asked, I went to Chiyo's shoulder grave. There were similar caves for there. There were many Chiyo's inheritance. Although there were dangers along the way, we finally, our group of Chiyu, to Chiyu. If I'm not wrong, the thing left behind in Chiyo's skull tomb should also be looking for someone to pass down his legacy to. If that's the case, this wooden box should have been obtained by someone else. Daozi seemed to have never thought of this before. After hearing my words, he frowned. After a while, he suddenly shook his head. Let's not talk about this. Ayu, is she behind us? He finally mentioned Wuyu. My heart tightened. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know how to explain it to him. When Daozi saw my expression, he seemed to realize something. He took 2 steps toward me, his voice anxious. He hurriedly asked, What happened to you? After hesitating for a moment, I looked at the panic-stricken Daozi and gritted my teeth. I braced myself and told him everything that had happened. After listening to my story, Daozi's body softened. He slumped to the ground and buried his head between his legs. He didn't say a word for a long time. Looking at Daozi, who was on the verge of breaking down, I couldn't help but sigh. Wuyu was born very good-looking. Although Daozi was now in the body of Yin soul, I could see how elegant he had been in the past. If Wuyu had been born as a human, they would have been a perfect match. What a happy couple they would have been. Unfortunately, their feelings were similar to Lao AI's and mine. From the very beginning, they were destined to have a difficult journey. In some ways, they were even more miserable than Lao AI and I. I didn't know how to comfort Daozi, so I could only quietly accompany him. However, because I couldn't wait for the fatty, I couldn't help but approach him after a long time. Although Senior Wu Yu has severed his soul, he is residing in the Xin Yuan sword. Sooner or later, he will recover. At that time, the two of you will no longer be bound by the Fushi Zither and will be free. Senior Daozi, please don't be too sad. After hearing my words, Daozi finally raised his head. There was no sadness or happiness on his face. He only nodded and said, Mr. Zhou, you have taken care of Ayu during this trip. This time, you risked your life to save him. I thank you on behalf of Ayu. I hastily waved my hand. Senior Wu Yu has also saved my life. Senior Daozi, please don't thank me. It's too much. Daozi didn't stand on ceremony with me. He stood up and sighed. My name when I was alive was Lu Ruxu. If Mr. Zhou doesn't mind, you can call me by my name. As for the word Daozi, please don't say again. I was stunned and immediately understood. This Lu Ruxu definitely had a deep hatred for Mount Longhu. The word Daozi was his position in Mount Longhu. He naturally didn't want others to call him that. I hastily nodded and eased the atmosphere. All right, if Senior doesn't mind, I'll call Senior Brother Lu. Speaking of the word Daozi, when we passed through the blood maple forest, the people from Mount Longhu caught up. One of them was the current Daozi. Oh, Lu Ruxu raised his eyes. The current Daozi. He, another pitiful fellow. As he spoke, the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. I didn't understand what he meant, but I didn't ask. Lu Ruxu continued. Mount Longhu will have a new Daozi every few years. Then, he will be summoned by Celestial Master Zhang. I've been here for 100 years. Counting on my fingers, Mount Longhu has probably had more than 10 Daozi. As he rambled on, his face was half mocking and half disgusted. I didn't know what he was thinking. My attention was completely focused on the second volume of the Death Scripture. After he finished speaking, I hurriedly cupped my hands towards him and said, Brother Lu, to tell you the truth, the main reason I came to Chiyo's Skull Tomb with Senior Wu Yue this time is to find this wooden box. Although Brother Lu said it's very dangerous, it's extremely important to me. No matter what, I must obtain it. Therefore, I want to take this wooden box. I hope Brother Lu won't stop me. Hearing what I said, Lu Ruxu stopped. After hesitating for a moment, he shook his head and said, It's not that I want to stop you. Although I came for this wooden box in the past, 100 years have passed, and I've become like this again. My body resides in this wooden box, and I don't have any improper thoughts about it. The reason why I stop you is that I don't want Mr. Zhou to repeat my mistakes. His expression was solemn, and he didn't seem to be lying. This made me a little uncertain. While I was thinking, Lu Rushi continued, If Mr. Zhou isn't in a hurry, you can stay here for 2 days. After coming in and studying the item in this wooden box, I gradually understood a few things. Although the item inside is very mysterious and precious, it seems to be, as Mr. Zhou said, waiting for someone. Waiting for someone? Hearing what he said, my eyes lit up. Before I could speak, Lu Ruxu continued. According to my conjecture, although the item in this wooden box is all-encompassing, it doesn't seem to be complete. From this, I can infer that the person waiting for the other half of the box must be the person who holds the other half. In other words, only the person who holds the other half is qualified to take it away. Otherwise, what happened to me that year was a warning. Chapter 725. After realizing this, I immediately thought of Bayan. This must have been arranged by her, just like when she had given me the first volume of the Death Scripture. Although she hadn't personally given me the second volume, she had already prepared it for me. With a smile, I didn't explain much to Lu Ruxu and walked over, extending my hand to take the wooden box. Seeing my actions, Lu Ruxu was startled before becoming angry. He frowned at me and said, I've already told you about the dangers. Why didn't you listen to my advice? Could it be that you thought I was deceiving you? After saying that, he swung his sleeves and coldly snorted before saying, That's good too. I'll have someone to accompany me in the Green Lantern Ancient Scroll. He was genuinely worried about my safety, so I didn't get angry. I just chuckled and took out the wooden box containing the first volume of the Death Scripture from Xiang Lu's leather pouch. I said to Lu Ruxu, Brother Lu, please take a look at this. He had already turned his head to the side, but after hearing my words, he didn't get angry and turned his head back. When he saw the 2 wooden boxes in my hands, his expression greatly changed. He took 2 steps back and pointed at me with a face full of disbelief. You? After stammering for a long time, he was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. I smiled again and embarrassedly rubbed my nose. Brother Lu, it seems that I'm that person. Lu Ruxu's face was still filled with shock. She stood in the distance and stared at me without moving. I felt strange and was about to speak when he quickly walked towards me. When he was in front of me, he didn't say anything and instead knelt down. I was momentarily shocked and hastily jumped to the side. I asked in astonishment, Brother Lu, why are you doing this? At this moment, Lu Ruxu had a bitter smile on his face. He shook his head and said to me, Zhou, No, Master, that year I schemed for the ancient scroll in the wooden box. After my body died, my young spirit was reborn, and I recognized this ancient scroll as my master. Now that Master has taken the ancient scroll, Lu Ruxu is naturally Master's servant and is willing to follow by your side. His words surprised me again. Although I don't have much friendship with him, I am indebted to Wu Yue. No matter what, I can't take Lu Ruxu as a servant. If I wait for Wu Yue to wake up, how will she deal with herself? Thinking about that, I immediately waved my hand and said, Brother Lu, you don't have to be like this. What happened between you and the ancient scroll has nothing to do with you and me. I'm good friends with Senior Wu Yue, so Brother Lu is naturally my friend. Don't mention what happened just now. Lu Ruxu bitterly smiled and shook her head again. Back then, I was confused by this ancient scroll and lost my mind. It was my fate to suffer this tribulation. Now, all I have left is a remnant soul, and I am borrowing the power of this ancient scroll to live on. I will never be able to leave this ancient scroll, and my mind has long since become its slave. Master, even if you don't want to call me master and slave, I have no other choice. Borrowing the power of this ancient scroll to survive, unable to leave for the rest of my life. The Death Scripture scroll itself actually had such an effect. Although I hadn't opened the box to look at the second volume of the Death Scripture, I had read through the first volume countless times since I was young. However, I had never sensed any power contained within it. Just as I was pondering, a rumbling sound came from outside the cave. My heart tightened as I remembered that the fatty was still obstructing Lu Jinyang and the people from Mount Longhu. I couldn't stay here and be entangled with Lu Ruxu for too long. Thus, I nodded and said, Since Brother Lu is bound by this ancient scroll, let's study it together later and see if there's any way to break free. Lu Ruxu wanted to say something more, but I waved my hand and interrupted her. Then, I extended my hand and opened the wooden box containing the second volume of the Death Scripture. Seeing me open the box, Lu Ruxu immediately shut her mouth and kept quiet out of fear. It seemed that she was truly intimidated by the second volume of the Death Scripture and was willing to become a servant. In my original imagination, the second volume of the Death Scripture should be the same as the first volume, a piece of cloth with words written on it. However, after opening the wooden box, I realized that I was completely wrong. There was no cloth, paper, or even any words in the wooden box. There was only a fist-sized bronze oil lamp. Looking at the small oil lamp, I was completely dumbfounded. Where was the second volume of the Death Scripture? Lu Ruxu had also said that the wooden box contained an ancient scroll, but where was the ancient scroll? What the hell was this oil lamp? While I was dumbfounded, Lu Ruxu's heart was palpitating. She retreated far away from me and lowered her head, not daring to look at the oil lamp. After being absent-minded for a long time, I asked Lu Ruxu, You said that the wooden box contained an ancient scroll, but why is there only one oil lamp? Hearing my words, Lu Ruxu raised her head and glanced at me. However, she didn't look at the oil lamp. Instead, she glanced at me as if doubting my question. She replied, Master, could it be that you don't know that this oil lamp is an ancient scroll? The oil lamp is an ancient scroll? I didn't understand what she meant and asked, How can an oil lamp be an ancient scroll? Lu Ruxu continued to look at me, her expression becoming increasingly strange. Master, you really don't know? This time, I didn't ask further and only nodded. Lu Ruxu's expression became one of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She sighed and said, Master, you don't even know this. How can an ancient scroll? He didn't finish his sentence, but it was clear that he didn't even know this. It was unbelievable that I was the person the ancient scroll was waiting for. After sighing, Lu Ruxu sternly said, This bronze oil lamp is an ancient divine item. It contains an extremely powerful divine power. If Master wants to read the ancient scroll, you only need to light it up. Light it up? I didn't understand what she meant. I looked at the simple and old oil lamp in my hand and found that there was no oil inside. The lamp was completely dry and didn't look like it could be used at all. Seeing my actions, Lu Ruxu couldn't help but bitterly smile. She continued to explain, When I said to light it up, I naturally didn't mean to use a flint to light it. What I meant was that Master only needs to infuse his true essence into it, and the ancient lamp will naturally light up. After she said that, I quickly understood. Since this bronze oil lamp was an ancient divine item, it naturally wouldn't be the same as a normal lamp. I was wrong. I smiled awkwardly and directly infused my shaman true essence into the bronze lamp. Although the death scripture didn't mention the difference between Qi and shaman Qi, regardless of whether it was Chiyo's tomb or the Swan and I Nangong, they were all related to shaman Qi. For what I could see, this ancient bronze lamp should also be powered by shaman Qi. However, I didn't expect that after infusing it with shaman Qi, it would be like a clay ox entering the sea. I found it strange and thought back to the 9 provinces cauldron. I guessed that the amount of shaman Qi and true essence I infused was too little. Thus, I took a deep breath and infused all of my shaman Qi and true essence into the lamp. With my current cultivation, my shaman Qi and true essence had already reached a considerable level. Although I had used up a large portion of it in my fight with Lu Jinyang, I had recovered quite a bit after half a day. However, I didn't expect that even though I had infused almost all of my shaman Qi and true essence into the lamp, there would still be no reaction. I began to feel strange. No matter how magical this bronze lamp was and how much shaman Qi it required, even if my shaman Qi and true essence didn't meet the requirements, there should at least be some reaction. Why wasn't there any life? I asked Lu Ruxu, but she shook her head and said that she only knew some things because her yang spirit had been reborn through this bronze lamp. She had never used this bronze lamp before, so she didn't know the specific method. I had no choice but to stop infusing the last bit of shaman Qi and true essence and try to use my Taoist Qi. In the fight just now, my Taoist Qi and true essence had been consumed even more, but with the true dragon's vein and the jade bracelet, I had recovered quite a bit. Under my control, a large amount of Taoist Qi and true essence was sent into the bronze lamp until my body was almost dried up. However, just like before, there was still no reaction from the bronze lamp. This time, I was at my wit's end. Chapter 726. I couldn't figure out how to light the ancient bronze lamp. Since I was worried about the fatty, I put the bronze lamp back into the wooden box to study later. I lifted my head and told Lu Ruxu about the fatty situation outside. Afterwards, I asked if he was willing to leave with me. Lu Ruxu was willing to be my slave, so he didn't hesitate and immediately replied, "I've been waiting in this ancient hall for 100 years. Every day, I hope to leave this place. How would I dare to disobey?" As he said that, he walked to my side. He didn't even look at the jade hall behind him. It was obvious that he didn't have any reluctance to leave. After thinking about it, anyone who had been imprisoned in a place for 100 years wouldn't have any good feelings towards that place. I smiled at him and didn't say anything. I put the wooden box into Xiang Lu's leather pouch and walked out of the jade hall. After leaving the jade hall, I went to the floating island. As I walked down the floating stone steps, Lu Ruxu suddenly pointed a shadowy area behind the floating island and said to me, "Although I've been trapped here all these years, I've been able to move freely in the cave." According to what I know, the back of the Jade Hall is where Chiyo's inheritance is. Although Chiyo's inheritance isn't as good as the Green Lamp Scroll, it's still an extraordinary item. If Master is interested, you can take it with you. Chiyo's inheritance? Wasn't that what Lu Jinyang wanted the most? To be honest, I wasn't too interested in Chiyo's inheritance after obtaining the second half of the death scripture. However, it was what Lu Jinyang wanted. Even if I didn't need it, it would be best to get it for myself. It was more important that Lu Jinyang couldn't get it. Although I thought that, time didn't allow me to do so. The fatty was still at the foot of the mountain. He had to deal with Lu Jinyang and the 3 Yang God celestial masters of Mount Longhu. I didn't dare to waste time. Thus, I shook my head at Lu Ruxu. Just as I was about to speak, I heard a loud rumble from the entrance of the cave. Immediately after, there was the sound of people rushing over. It was obvious that someone had arrived here. My expression instantly changed. It was definitely Lu Jinyang and the people from Mount Longhu that broke the fatty's formation. Did something happen to the fatty? I was so anxious that I hated that I couldn't rush out to check on the fatty. However, there was only one way out of this cave. Before I could take action, several shadows appeared inside the cave. I looked up and saw that they were the 3 Yang god celestial masters of Mount Longhu. However, the strange thing was that Lu Xingyang didn't appear. At that moment, the three heavenly masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain were in a sorry state. They were covered in wounds, and their clothes were tattered. It was obvious that they had suffered a lot in Fatty's 10 terminal formation. When they arrived, they were immediately attracted by the floating island's jade hall. 3 pairs of eyes widened. After looking around, they came back to their senses and focused their gazes on us. I thought that he would ask me a question, but unexpectedly, when their gazes shifted to me, Li Chuanxiu cried out involuntarily to Lu Ruxu, who was next to me. Daozi? As soon as he said that, the incumbent Taoist quickly reacted. His expression darkened, and he ignored Li Chuanxiu. Instead, he asked Lu Ruxu, "Are you the sinner who betrayed Dragon Tiger Mountain and escaped?" Betrayal? I can't bear such a heavy crime. What I did back then was to survive. I took my wife far away from home. Lu Ruxu's gaze immediately focused on the 3 people from Dragon Tiger Mountain. When she looked at Li Chuanxiu, she had a complicated expression. However, she didn't speak and only replied to Daozi. Hearing his reply, Daozi's expression instantly darkened, and he shouted angrily, flowery words. "It doesn't matter whether you admit to this crime or not. It's fine as long as you show up. Before I came, the Heavenly Masters told me that you've already seen the contents of the Heavenly Book. If we can't successfully retrieve the Heavenly Book, it'll be the same if we bring you back." After saying that, he smiled sinisterly. Lu Ruxu looked at him indifferently with a hint of mockery in the corner of her mouth. "Bring me back? With just you?" "That's right, with just me." Daozi sneered and nodded. He took out a jade token from his pocket and said, "Lu Ruxu, do you remember what this is?" The surface of this jade token was moist and engraved with complicated patterns. Although I've never seen this thing before, seeing Daozi's fearless expression, I instantly guessed that this jade token must be extraordinary to Lu Ruxu. It's very likely that it's something that can restrain him. Sure enough, when Lu Ruxu saw this jade token, her expression immediately changed. She frowned and said, "Soul token?" Daozi laughed again, and his words were filled with infinite mockery. Every Taoist of Dragon Tiger Mountain has a soul token left in the Celestial Master's Mansion. When you escaped from Dragon Tiger Mountain, you deliberately went to the Celestial Master's Mansion to destroy the soul token. You're quite meticulous. However, do you really think that the people guarding the Celestial Master's Mansion were a bunch of good-for-nothings who allowed you to come and go as you pleased? Not only did you destroy the soul token, but you also escaped from Dragon Tiger Mountain safely, and later on, there was a huge chase, but there was suddenly no news of you. Do you think that you hid well enough? After asking a few questions, Daozi flung his wide sleeves and continued with an arrogant expression. "The reason why you and the Guqin spirit survived until today is because the Celestial Master had already predicted today's ending and deliberately did it." Lu Ruxu didn't say a word as she listened to the continuous questioning. Her soul body trembled slightly, and it was obvious that she wasn't calm at all. My heart also trembled slightly. Although I still didn't know the inside story of Lu Ruxu and her husband, I could understand his feelings at the moment. The two of them struggled hard, but in the end, they realized that they had stepped into a trap set up by someone else. Neither of them could remain indifferent. Meanwhile, Daozi's expression was extremely proud. He raised the jade token in his hand and said loudly, "All of the Celestial Master's arrangements were for the sake of obtaining the Heavenly Book. Lu Ruxu, if you know what's good for you, then obediently follow me back to Mount Longhu today. The Celestial Master might consider your hard work and pardon your death sentence. However, if you're stubborn and continue to resist, then there's no need for you to continue living. As long as I gently crush this soul token, you will vanish into thin air." At this moment, I finally understood what the jade token in his hand was. It was Lu Ruxu's soul token. Previously, when I was at the ghost-raising sect in Hong Kong, I had seen this kind of thing. However, they mostly used this kind of soul token to control ghosts. Occasionally, A ghost would break free from control and turn on its owner. The person who raised the ghost would crush the soul token, and the ghost would vanish into thin air. I originally thought that this kind of thing would only be used by unorthodox sects like the ghost-raising sect. I didn't expect that the people of Mount Longhu would actually use such despicable methods to control their own disciples. After listening to Daozi's words, Lu Ruxu was silent for a long time before shifting his gaze away from the jade token. He turned to stare at Daozi and said coldly, "If you crush the soul token, I will indeed vanish into thin air. However, if that happens, the Celestial Master's dream of obtaining the heavenly book will be wishful thinking." His counterattack seemed extremely laughable to Daozi. As soon as he finished speaking, Daozi said in a mocking tone, "Naive, even if you vanish into thin air, I only need to bring back a fragment of your soul. With the Celestial Master's methods, he can use the soul-searching technique. I think you're just being wishful thinking. How dare you use this to threaten me?" Lu Ruxu fell silent. However, this time, his expression didn't change much. After a moment, he wore an indifferent smile as he looked at Daozi and continued to speak. "A wise man once said that one can die in peace if one hears the Tao in the morning. This Lu is someone who has already died once. There is no difference if I die again. As for you, as the Daozi of Mount Longhu, you're just like me at the time, completely in the dark." His random words caused Daozi to frown. However, he was in a good situation at the moment, so he remained calm and asked, "Then tell me, what are you keeping me in the dark about?" Lu Ruxu sighed and continued, "Mount Longhu has always been connected by blood. The Zhang family has been passed down since ancient times. Since that's the case, why do they set up the position of Daozi? Although this position is noble, it's redundant. Every position on Mount Longhu has its own position. Only Daozi seems to be redundant. What does this prove?" Daozi's frown deepened. He waited for Lu Ruxu to stop speaking before he continued to ask. Lu Ruxu shook her head. "This naturally doesn't prove anything. It was just my initial doubt. Back then, the real problem that troubled me was that all the Daozi of Mount Longhu were young and talented people. However, every Daozi held a position for less than 10 years. After that, there was no news of them. Therefore, I want to know where those Daozi ended up." Chapter 727. The conversation between Lu Ruxu and Daozi left me at a loss as I watched from the side. After thinking for a while, I was shocked. The Daozi of Mount Longhu only served for 10 years and then disappeared. As far as I knew, the Daozi of Mount Longhu were all talented people. With all kinds of cultivation resources provided by Mount Longhu, most of them had the cultivation of a Yang God Celestial Master. After reaching the Yang God realm, their lifespan would increase greatly. Not to mention 10 years, they could even serve for 100 years. How could the situation that Lu Ruxu had described happen? While I was puzzled, the Daozi's expression was a bit unnatural. After a moment of silence, he coldly replied to Lu Ruxu, "Don't try to mislead people. Don't you know the final destination of the Daozi of Mount Longhu? Naturally, they ascended through Celestial Master Zhang's Immortal Ascension Assembly." Ascended through Celestial Master Zhang? I subconsciously widened my eyes. The Daozi's answer was too ridiculous. Ascended through Celestial Master Zhang. That was a supreme realm. Not to mention the mortal world. Even in the blessed enclave, only Wang Can's father had ascended through Celestial Master Zhang for thousands of years. On Mount Longhu, there was a new Daozi every 10 years, but they all ascended through Celestial Master Zhang? This was simply a joke. Even if Celestial Master Zhang's cultivation was exceedingly high, I didn't believe it at all. Lu Ruxu's face was also full of mockery. She asked the Daozi, "Celestial Master Zhang did say that, but do you believe it? Let me ask you, ascended through Celestial Master Zhang is an immortal realm that can give you an endless lifespan. If it was so easy, why didn't Celestial Master Zhang himself ascend through Celestial Master Zhang himself?" The Daozi's expression was very unnatural. His cheeks trembled slightly, but he still said coldly, "Why wouldn't I believe it? Celestial Master Zhang naturally has his reasons for not ascending through Celestial Master Zhang. I don't need to speculate about it. As for you, before I came, the Celestial Master had already told me that you were cunning and treacherous. Back then, you betrayed Mount Longhu because you didn't have much luck and didn't have the chance to rise to the top. That was why you caused so many disasters. At this time, you're not kneeling on the ground to admit your crimes, but you still dare to mislead the crowd with your lies. You really deserve to be punished." Lu Ruxu was slightly taken aback by his words, but she quickly continued, "Then didn't Celestial Master Zhang tell you that you are a person of great fortune? As long as you handle this matter well, when you return, he will definitely hold an immortal ascension assembly for you and help you ascend?" After saying this, Daoist Child's face suddenly trembled, and he stared at Lu Ruxu for a long time before he nodded and said, "That's right, the Heavenly Master did promise me. Unlike you, as a sinner of Mount Longhu, you can only struggle in the mortal world forever. No, now you don't even have the chance to struggle in the mortal world. You can only suffer in the 9 underworlds." After saying this, Daoist Child seemed to be unwilling to talk to Lu Ruxu anymore, and he said sternly, "Don't talk any more nonsense. I'll give you the choice just now. Go back with me obediently, or your soul will scatter. I'll give you one last chance." Lu Ruxu looked at Daoist Child with a bit of pity in her eyes, and she sighed, "Sure enough, it's exactly the same as what you said to me back then. After so many years, Celestial Master Zhang is really a conservative person." Lu Ruxu shook her head, and the ridicule on her face became even stronger. Her voice became a bit louder, and she continued, "The old freak has always used this set of words to deceive so many people. Bullish *T Immortal Ascension Assembly. It's just a trick used by the old freak to lure you to your death in order to survive. For no reason. He gave you a status that was second to only one person, gave you a divine weapon to use, gave you cultivation resources to squander, and finally held an Immortal Ascension Assembly for you. What do you think Mount Longhu is? The government's relief center?" These words were like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Not only Daoist Child, but even Li Chuanxiu and Lu Rux's expressions became extremely ugly. It was very obvious that they had heard something illogical from her words. I was also incomparably shocked. Lu Ruxu's words seemed to involve some secret of Celestial Master Zhang. Although he didn't explain the specifics, the hidden information was bound to be extremely shocking. This time, Daoist Child's mouth moved, but in the end, he didn't know what to say to refute. He simply flew into a rage out of humiliation and loudly scolded, "Nonsense! How can you slander the name of Celestial Master Zhang? Since you're so stubborn, don't blame me for not caring about the friendship of fellow disciples." After saying that, he directly raised the soul tablet in his hand and ruthlessly pinched it with his 5 fingers. Without waiting for Lu Ruxu to react, the soul tablet was instantly crushed into countless pieces. Following his actions, Lu Ruxu had no time to react. His body slightly swayed a few times, and his originally solid soul body instantly became much dimmer. However, he still stood there, calmly looking at Daoist Child. His body didn't move at all. At first, I was startled and prepared to rush forward to help Lu Ruxu. However, Daoist Child's movements were too fast, and I didn't have time to react. However, after the soul tablet shattered, I looked at Lu Ruxu and found that something was strange. Apart from his body becoming a bit dimmer, he didn't have any other reaction, let alone his soul being destroyed. I couldn't even see a trace of pain on his face. I was astonished, and the expressions of the 3 celestial masters of Mount Longhu greatly changed. They stared at Lu Ruxu as if they had seen a ghost. After a while, Daoist Child asked in bewilderment, "The soul tablet has shattered. Why aren't you dead?" Lu Rux's expression was a bit complicated. He turned his head and looked at me before smiling bitterly. "There is indeed a remnant of my soul on the soul tablet. With the power of the formation, my soul will naturally be destroyed. However, after I died 100 years ago, my soul was no longer my own. Even if I wanted to destroy my soul, I wouldn't be able to do it, much less if you were holding onto the soul tablet. There was an indescribable sadness in his voice. Perhaps the three celestial masters of Mount Longhu didn't understand, but I instantly understood. He seemed to be saying that his soul was now completely attached to the copper lamp, and he couldn't even commit suicide. The soul tablet that Mount Longhu had left behind was naturally even more useless. At most, it would only make his soul body slightly dimmer. Without the threat of the soul tablet, the three celestial masters of Mount Longhu still had the upper hand. Taoist Child waved his sleeve and coldly said, "Since you can't do it, let me help you." After saying that, he charged forward, followed closely by Li Chuanshu and the other celestial masters. I instinctively wanted to charge forward, but I immediately reacted. With my strength, I wouldn't be able to attack the three celestial masters in time, and I would be completely suppressed. Just as I was hesitating, Lu Ruxu charged forward. With a sweep of his hands, a violent gale instantly appeared in the cave, rushing towards the three celestial masters of Mount Longhu. In terms of aura alone, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. According to what Wu Yue had told me, when Lu Ruxu left Mount Longhu, he was already at the Yang God Celestial Master Realm. Although he had experienced many changes, his cultivation hadn't fallen. After 100 years, his cultivation naturally wasn't below that of the three celestial masters of Mount Longhu. It was normal for him to be able to do this. Since there were already people in front of me, I naturally didn't need to send myself to death. Thus, I carefully hid in a corner and watched quietly. Who knew that just as I took 2 steps back, Lu Ruxu's figure would suddenly appear in front of me like a ghost. He quickly said to me, "I've already stopped the 3 of them. Get out of here first. Later, I'll activate the mechanism here and bury them here. Then, I'll meet up with you." After saying that, he didn't even wait for my reply. He directly grabbed my shoulder and forcefully pushed me out of the cave. Originally, I wasn't far from the exit of the cave. After being pushed by him, I felt a strong force pushing my body to the entrance of the cave. I turned my head to look behind me. The figures of the 3 celestial masters of Mount Longhu were still imprinted in the violent gale, and I couldn't see any traces of them. Only then did I feel slightly relieved. I lifted my feet and walked outside. Ever since I had obtained the copper lamp, I had wanted to come out and check on the fatty situation. Now that I had finally escaped, Lu Ruxu's matter behind me wasn't important right now. I should first check on the fatty situation. Chapter 728. I hurriedly walked out of the cave. I was extremely worried about the fatty. Just now, he had trapped Lu Jinyang and the 3 celestial masters from Longhu Mountain in the 10-terminal formation. Although Lu Jinyang was nowhere to be found, the 3 celestial masters from Longhu Mountain had all appeared. It was hard to imagine what Fatty's situation was like. With these worries in mind, I moved quickly. After leaving the cave, I rushed to the place where the Fatty had set up the 10-terminal formation. At first glance, I was stunned. The bronze giants were still standing around. The Fatty was sitting cross-legged on the head of one of them. His body was swaying, and I didn't know what he was doing. Seeing that the Fatty was fine, I heaved a sigh of relief. I felt much more at ease. I stomped on the ground and prepared to run to meet up with him. However, as soon as I took a step, I felt the world spin around me. My body couldn't help but sway. I was dumbfounded. Then, I understood why the Fatty's body was swaying. It turned out the entire ground was shaking. What happened? Is it an earthquake? I was bewildered. I took a deep breath and urged my true essence to stabilize my body. I couldn't move fast, so I had to carefully walk toward the 10-terminal formation where the Fatty was. The ground kept shaking. When I arrived in front of the 10-terminal formation, I felt that it was difficult to walk. However, compared to this strange earthquake, I was more worried about the 10-terminal formation in front of me. When I got closer, I saw the Fatty sitting cross-legged on the head of the bronze giant. His eyes were closed, as if he was in a coma. This 10-terminal formation was really powerful. Without his control, I couldn't enter it. Fortunately, the fat man wasn't unconscious like I had imagined. I stood outside the formation and shouted. The fat man opened his eyes. When he saw me, he pointed his left hand at me. The bronze statues in front of me moved to the left and right, creating a path. Since the ground was still shaking, the giants were also shaking. From time to time, they bumped into each other, creating ear-piercing noises. It looked as if they could fall at any moment. I had a bad premonition. This strange shaking seemed to be disadvantageous to the fatty's 10-terminal formation. His formation was mainly attached to these bronze statues. If these bronze statues collapsed, the 10-terminal formation would collapse on its own. With that in mind, I exerted force on my feet and dashed into the 10-terminal formation through the gap the bronze statue had created. The interior of the formation was completely under the fatty's control. Just as I entered, I felt a buoyancy surge up from beneath me, carrying me upwards. In an instant, I went from the feet of the bronze giants to the top of their heads and landed on the shoulder of the giant next to the fatty. Just as he steadied himself, Fatty's voice rang out. Third baby, what's the situation in the cave? Just now, I really couldn't stop them from escaping. Did you bump into them? Fatty's voice was filled with guilt and concern. However, due to the constant shaking of the bronze giants, his voice was intermittent. I had to repeat myself twice before I understood. I shook my head and briefly explained the situation in the cave to the fatty. Although I hadn't explicitly told the fatty about the second volume of the Death Scripture, the fatty knew that I had my own plans for this trip. Now that he heard that I had gotten what I wanted, his face lit up, and he hurriedly told me about the situation here. After I had left, Lu Jinyang and the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu had been trapped in the 10-terminal formation. Although their cultivation bases were high and they had resisted with all their might, the 10-terminal formation borrowed the power of the bronze giants and the Chiyu divine power that naturally existed in the Chiyu tomb. Lu Jinyang and the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu couldn't gain any advantage. They had resisted with all their might, but to no avail. Because of this, I could slowly search for the second volume of the Death Scripture in the cave. The fatty had bought me enough time. However, good times didn't last long. Lu Jinyang and the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu had been fighting on their own. However, after being trapped for a while, Lu Jinyang took the initiative to find the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu. After the 4 of them had a secret meeting, Lu Jinyang sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes as if he was activating some kind of technique. Their every move in the 10-terminal formation couldn't escape the fatty's eyes. Therefore, although the fatty didn't know what Lu Jinyang wanted to do, he was cautious and immediately activated the formation in an attempt to interrupt Lu Jinyang's movements. Of course, his idea was correct. However, after the power of the formation attacked, the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu surrounded Lu Jinyang and helped him block the power of the formation. Seeing this, the fatty understood that Lu Jinyang was activating some kind of technique that could change the situation. That was why the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu were protecting him. Therefore, the fatty became nervous. He concentrated all his strength and continuously used the power of the formation to attack the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu. The power of the formation was endless. Although the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu had high cultivation levels, they couldn't withstand such exhaustion. Under the fatty's crazy attacks, it didn't take long before they couldn't hold on anymore. They revealed an opening and were swept away by the power of the formation. All of them were injured. The fatty was overjoyed. He focused all his attention on Lu Jinyang and activated all the power of the formation to attack Lu Jinyang. However, at that moment, the 3 heavenly masters of Mount Longhu, who were injured just now, exploded at the same time and concentrated on the same node of the 10-terminal formation. At that moment, the fatty finally understood that Lu Jinyang and the others had played a trick. Lu Jinyang's seemingly unfathomable actions were actually just to attract the fatty's attention. After the fatty panicked, all the power of the formation gathered, and the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu took the opportunity to break the formation. This trick was executed perfectly. After activating all the power of the formation, the fatty couldn't attend to anything else at all. He could only watch as the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu broke the 10-terminal formation and went straight to the cave. After leaving the range of the formation, the fatty couldn't cause any trouble to the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu. Although he was anxious, there was nothing he could do. He wanted to send me a message, but the voice transmission talisman couldn't be sent out in the formation. He could only worry in vain. He finally felt relieved when he saw me. As for Lu Jinyang, after the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu left, the fatty vented his anger on Lu Jinyang. However, he didn't expect that Lu Jinyang wasn't just a bait. He was indeed activating some kind of power, and it was only after the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu left that he revealed it completely. At that moment, the earth was shaking like an earthquake. It was caused by Lu Jinyang. The fatty wanted to activate the power of the formation to stop it, but the tremors made the bronze giant inside the 10-terminal formation unstable and unable to use its power. Moreover, Lu Jinyang had a blood-red barrier protecting him, so he couldn't do anything to him. After listening to the fatty's explanation, I finally understood what had happened. I became silent and began to think of a countermeasure. Judging from the current situation, I had already obtained the second half of the death scripture. Leaving this place as soon as possible was the best option. Moreover, Lu Jinyang couldn't move, and the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu were being held back by Lu Ruxu. It was a good opportunity to escape. However, I hesitated for a long time as I recalled my promise to Wu Yue. I couldn't act so decisively. After thinking for a long time, I said to the fatty, Wu Yue's husband's soul is in the cave. He's currently holding back the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu so that I can escape. Before leaving, he told me that he's trying to use the mechanism in the cave to trap the three heavenly masters of Mount Longhu inside. If he succeeds, the three of us will meet up and quickly leave this place. As for now, we'll deal with Lu Jinyang while we wait. What do you think? Fatty nodded. That's settled then. However, I have a bad feeling about Lu Jinyang's side. Let's not talk about anything else. Just this vibration alone has almost destroyed the power of the formation. After he finishes activating it, I feel that with the strength of the two of us, we won't be able to contend against him. Chapter 729. After we made our decision, the fatty and I immediately took action. The fatty was still sitting on the head of the bronze statue, controlling the remaining power of the formation. I jumped down from a statue's shoulder, heading toward Lu Jinyang's location. As soon as I entered the 10-terminal formation, the fatty directly brought me to the bronze statue, so I didn't see Lu Jinyang. At this moment, I went to the place the fatty had told me. I looked forward and saw a blood-red air mass under the feet of the bronze statues. It looked like a giant blood cocoon. Although I couldn't see the situation inside the cocoon, according to what the fatty had said, it was Lu Jinyang's protective barrier. Facing Lu Jinyang, I couldn't be too careful. I took a deep breath and gathered the true essence that I had recovered. Then, I carefully walked toward the blood cocoon. The closer I got, the more violent the vibration became. I had to use the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps to maintain my balance. When the fatty had told me about it, I didn't feel anything. But now that I was close to the strong vibration, I was frightened. It was just like what the fatty had said. What Lu Jinyang was accumulating now was a power that could destroy the heavens and the earth. Once he was done, the 10-terminal formation wouldn't be able to sustain itself, and the fatty and I wouldn't be able to escape. After confirming this point, I didn't care about safety anymore. Who knew how long Lu Jinyang would need? If I acted earlier, I would have a higher chance of winning. I gritted my teeth and urged the true essence in my body. I took a few steps. Under the effect of the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps, I ignored all the vibrations around me. I dashed toward the blood cocoon where Lu Jinyang was. While I got closer, I studied the cocoon in front of me. The thick blood energy lingering on it was very similar to the blood energy in Chiyo's tomb. It wasn't strange. Lu Xingyang had received Chiyo's inheritance, so it wasn't strange that he could control the blood energy in Chiyo's tomb. The most important thing now was to break the blood energy barrier. I carefully extended my hand to touch the blood cocoon. At first, I couldn't feel anything. My finger directly went through the blood mist. After advancing an inch, his fingers still didn't feel any resistance. Instead, he felt a burning pain. It was as if there was some kind of strong acid inside the cocoon, bringing with it a strong sense of corrosion. I hurriedly retracted my hand, my heart calming down a little. Although the power within the cocoon wasn't weak, I was sure that Lu Xingyang wouldn't be able to retaliate. I wasn't sure if I could break the cocoon, but at least I wouldn't have to worry about Lu Xingyang's sneak attack when I broke the cocoon. If I wanted to break the barrier, I had to break it at a single point. I opened my mouth and spat out the Xianyuan sword. As one of the 10 great ancient divine weapons, there was no need to doubt the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. The only bad news was that I had consumed a lot of Zhenyuan in my body. I didn't know how much of the Xianyuan sword power I could activate. Of course, no matter how much power I could use, I couldn't wait any longer. After I took out the Xianyuan sword, I infused all of the Zhenyuan in my body into it. I lifted my head and said to the fat man in the distance, "I'm going to pierce the cocoon. You control the power of the formation and attack the cocoon with the tip of my sword. Do you understand?" The fat man didn't say anything and just nodded. Immediately, a gust of wind swept over and circled around me. It was the power of the 10 terminal formation. We were all prepared. I didn't hesitate and controlled the Xianyuan sword. I used the power of the emotionless sword path to gather all of my power at the tip of the sword. At the same time, I opened and closed my eyes. The power of insight instantly appeared. I stared at the blood cocoon and found a weak point. Then, I thrust the Xianyuan sword out. Following my movements, the gust of wind that had been circling around me instantly appeared on the Xianyuan sword. The Xianyuan sword was an ancient treasure, so it had a repulsive power. It was about to repel the gust of wind. However, under my control, I didn't exert any force. The gust of wind that the fat man had controlled successfully reached the body of the Xianyuan sword and gathered at the tip of the sword. Then it rushed towards the blood cocoon. As soon as the tip of the sword touched the silkworm cocoon, I felt a strong force coming at me. I couldn't help but fly backward. Even the Xianyuan sword in my hand was knocked out of my hand, falling to the side. After I landed, I heard a loud explosion coming from the silkworm cocoon. At the same time, I couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Had the barrier been broken? I had doubts in my heart. I didn't care about my internal injuries and crawled up from the ground. I lifted my head to look at the cocoon. It was still shrouded in a bloody mist. Even the place where the tip of the sword had touched didn't look any different from before. The only difference was that the tremors in the surroundings had lessened significantly. It was clear that the sword strike that was infused with the power of the 10 terminal formation had successfully disrupted Lu Xingyang's concentration, even though it had failed to break through the crimson cocoon. Lu Xingyang was unable to focus on activating this unknown technique. The result wasn't too bad. However, the problem was that I had used up all of the true essence in my body. I didn't know how the fat man was doing. I took a deep breath to suppress the injuries in my body. Then, I turned to ask the fat man about his current situation. The fat man told me that he had used all of the remaining power of the 10 terminal formation in that attack. Now, he needed time to accumulate enough power. My situation was similar. I had used up all of my true essence. I also needed time to replenish the true dragon chi in the jade bracelet. I quickly analyzed the situation and said to the fat man, "From now on, we'll quickly recover our strength. We'll attack again in half an hour. What do you think?" The fat man nodded and closed his eyes. He made complicated hand seals to control all the bronze statues in the 10 terminal formation, making them sit cross-legged on the ground. White mist rose from the top of their heads and gathered in the fat man's hands. I didn't have time to think about how magical the 10 terminal formation was. I quickly sat cross-legged on the ground and took out the jade bracelet. The remaining wisp of true essence in my body moved rapidly to absorb the true dragon vein in the jade bracelet. It entered the vein of the heaven vein and turned into true essence. Although the situation was urgent, I still set a time limit of 1 hour. It wasn't because I wasn't worried that Lu Xingyang would wake up earlier. It was because the previous attack had made me realize that if the fat man and I weren't fully prepared, our next attack wouldn't be powerful enough. Our efforts would be in vain. If that was the case, it would be better for us to gather all of our powers and do our best. If we still couldn't break Lu Xingyang's barrier, the only option left was to escape. Of course, even though I had made such preparations, I still kept a portion of my attention on the cocoon while I was recovering my true essence. If Lu Xingyang really woke up early, even though I was definitely not his match, I definitely wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. As time passed, the true essence in my body gradually recovered to about half. However, I became increasingly anxious. This was because the vibrations that had previously disappeared had reappeared around the blood-red cocoon where Lu Xingyang was. Moreover, they were much more violent than before. The bronze statues in the 10-terminal formation couldn't help but sway and collide with each other, creating loud sounds. It was obvious that Lu Xingyang had recovered from the Xianyuan sword's attack and was using that terrifying spell again. I hesitated. Should I stop recovering my true essence and join hands with the fat man to try to break Lu Xingyang's blood-red barrier again? Or should I follow the original plan and wait for 1 hour for both of our powers to fully recover? If I tried again and still couldn't break the cocoon, Lu Xingyang definitely wouldn't give me and the fat man a second chance. If I followed the original plan and waited for 1 hour for the fat man and I to fully recover, the chances of breaking the cocoon would increase. However, from the current situation, it was highly possible that Lu Xingyang would complete his spell and break the 10-terminal formation before then. Just as I couldn't make up my mind, I heard footsteps from afar. I turned my head to look and saw a black figure rapidly running towards us from the sacred mountain. If it wasn't Lu Ruxu, who else could it be? Chapter 730. The reason why the fatty and I stayed here to break Lu Xingyang's protective barrier was mainly because Lu Ruxu was still in the cave. Wu Yue and I had an agreement that we couldn't abandon Lu Ruxu. Otherwise, we would have left long ago. Now that Lu Ruxu was here, it meant that we had no reason to stay here, and we didn't need to think about when to take action. I gathered the true essence that had dissipated from my body and beckoned to the fatty, who was still sitting on the bronze statue, to ask him to come down and meet me. The fatty was still sitting there, anxiously mobilizing the power of the 10-terminal formation. When he saw my action, he didn't react and looked puzzled. I pointed at Lu Ruxu, who was getting closer and closer. The fatty turned to look and understood. He let out a sigh of relief and jumped down from the head of the bronze statue, landing next to me. Lu Ruxu was still halfway up the mountain, so the fatty and I didn't immediately leave the 10-terminal formation. Instead, we stood at the same spot and waited for him to arrive. At that moment, the power of the blood cocoon that Lu Xingyang was in was increasing. The fatty and I couldn't help but float up and down due to the vibrations. If it wasn't for our high cultivation, we wouldn't have been able to stand here. The fatty turned to look at the blood cocoon and said to me hesitantly, "Third baby, don't you think that this is an opportunity for us?" I didn't understand what he meant and looked at him suspiciously. Fatty continued, "Lu Xingyang doesn't have the strength to fight back right now. If we can take this opportunity to finish him off, on one hand, we can take revenge for you. On the other hand, we won't have to be on tenterhooks and be on guard against him every night." His words stirred my heart, but I quickly came back to my senses from the temptation of revenge. Just now, when I activated the Xianyuan sword, it proved that even if Lu Xingyang didn't have the strength to fight back, he wasn't someone we could easily deal with. If we stayed here, Lu Xingyang could wake up at any time. At that time, we would go for wool and come home shorn. Just as I was about to tell the fatty, Lu Ruxu had already arrived in front of us. His black shirt was still clean, and he didn't look tired. I asked him, "We're the three from Mount Longhu." Lu Ruxu shook her head and said, "I activated the mechanism in the cave and wanted to completely bury them. However, the mechanism has been in disrepair for many years and has lost most of its power. It can only trap the three of them in the cave, and they won't be able to come out for a while." He looked regretful, but I still heaved a sigh of relief. I don't have any deep enmity with those three from Mount Longhu. It's fine as long as I can trap them temporarily. After understanding the situation, I didn't dare to stay any longer and hastily said to Lu Ruxu, "Now that there is nothing left in Chiyo's skull tomb, we should quickly leave." The fatty and Lu Ruxu didn't have any problems. After we nodded, the three of us walked out of the 10-terminal formation. After walking out of the 10-terminal formation, there wasn't much vibration from Lu Jinyang's blood cocoon. We followed the path that we came from and quickly reached the blood maple forest. The blood spirit guards in the blood maple forest were nowhere to be found. Moreover, with the threat of Lu Jinyang, the three of us sped through the blood maple forest. In less than 15 minutes, we had reached the outside. Outside the blood maple forest was the endless darkness that we came from. At that time, we relied on the power of the heaven-measuring ruler to pass through the darkness and enter Chiyo's tomb. There was only one heaven-measuring ruler. At that time, my plan was to enter the tomb, find Lu Ruxu, and rely on her heaven-measuring ruler to get out. After entering Chiyo's tomb, due to the sudden appearance of Lu Jinyang and the others, the situation suddenly became tense. I completely forgot to ask Lu Ruxu about this, and only reacted now. I couldn't help but feel nervous. Does Lu Ruxu still have the heaven-measuring ruler? I turned to look at Lu Ruxu and asked her how she had passed through this place, and if she could still get out. Lu Ruxu's expression was calm, and she didn't reply. Instead, she flung her wide sleeves, and a white object appeared in her hand. I looked at it and was instantly elated. It was the heaven-measuring ruler in her hand. My last bit of worry was gone. I quickly said to Lu Ruxu, "I wonder if Mr. can use this to protect us when we get out? If it's inconvenient for Mr., he can also use the method to control it." After saying that, I extended my hand and pointed at the fatty. Lu Ruxu smiled faintly and handed the heaven-measuring ruler to the fatty. "Let this little friend control it." The fatty extended his hand to take the heaven-measuring ruler, but at that moment, the ground under our feet suddenly shook as if there was an earthquake. My first reaction was that the situation on Lu Jinyang's side had changed. I quickly turned to look behind me, but we were already very far away from the 10-terminal formation and couldn't see what was happening there. The ground under our feet only shook for a moment, then there was no more movement. I couldn't guess what had happened, but it wasn't good news for us. We didn't dare to stay any longer. After the fatty received the heaven-measuring ruler, he immediately formed a hand seal to activate the heaven-measuring ruler. Just like when we came, a gentle light quickly rose from the heaven-measuring ruler and enveloped the three of us. Then, we floated up and merged with the darkness. In the boundless void, we couldn't see anything other than us in the light. Without any reference, we couldn't even sense our own speed. We were in the white light of the heaven-measuring ruler. We seemed to be moving extremely fast, but at the same time, we seemed to be floating without moving. I didn't know how much time had passed before a ray of light appeared in the darkness in front of us. I immediately felt a force throw me out. When I raised my head again, I found that the three of us had returned to the cave. We were still in Chiyo's tomb, so I didn't dare to lower my guard. I immediately stood up and urged the fatty to walk out of the cave. As for Lu Ruxu, he didn't say anything and just followed us out of the cave. His footsteps were extremely fast, and he was even ahead of me and the fatty. He seemed to be very familiar with this place. After thinking about it, it was Wu Yue who had brought us to this cave that led to Chiyo's tomb. Lu Ruxu must have been the first to discover this place. It was normal that he was familiar with this place. The cave was winding. When we came here, the path didn't seem to be very far, but now it seemed very long. When we were halfway there, the ground suddenly shook, making me anxious. Although I didn't think that Lu Jinyang could catch up to us so quickly, he had always been secretive and couldn't be judged by common sense. While I was thinking about this, Lu Ruxu suddenly stopped in front of us. At this moment, we were walking in the narrowest part of the cave, which only allowed one person to pass. After Lu Ruxu stopped, the fatty and I, who were following behind her, also stopped. "What's going on?" I asked her. Lu Ruxu didn't answer. His body floated backward. In this narrow space, I didn't know how he managed to get behind me. He was a ghost, so he didn't have a physical body. It was normal for him to disappear behind me. However, what surprised me was that in front of the cave, on the path that we had to pass, there was a floating black flame. I didn't know why, but when I saw that flame, my first thought was of Lu Jinyang. Flames were bright things, but at first glance, this black flame gave me an extremely evil feeling. It was exactly the same as Lu Jinyang's aura. Lu Ruxu and the fatty didn't say anything. After thinking for a while, I made a decision. Although the space here was narrow, the three of us had extraordinary cultivations. We bent our bodies to avoid the black flames and walked through them. Then, we ran as fast as we could into the distance. Just as the three of us went around the fireball, there was a sudden explosion behind us. We turned around and saw that the originally small fireball had already turned into a huge fireball that covered the entire cave. A black silhouette slowly appeared from within the fireball. Chapter 731. Seeing Lu Jinyang appear, the three of us stopped in our tracks and stood on the spot, not knowing what to do. From the Chiyu tomb to here, not to mention the blood maple forest, it was a very long distance to go through the darkness. I thought that Lu Jinyang had been left far behind by us. Who would have thought that he would appear in front of us with the help of the black flame? What should we do now? The fatty and Lu Ruxu focused their gazes on me, obviously waiting for my decision. I remained silent and pondered for a while. Even though Lu Jinyang's figure had appeared, it was obvious from his appearance that he hadn't arrived yet. The black flames surrounding Lu Jinyang's body should be something similar to a teleportation array. His body had used it to travel a long distance to reach here. This process required time and couldn't be accomplished in one go. Thus, we still had the time to destroy the teleportation array to stop Lu Jinyang from arriving. Previously, when Lu Jinyang was preparing his mystical spell in the 10-terminal formation, I had chosen to escape due to Lu Ruxu's arrival. However, after rushing here, I realized that Lu Jinyang was still there. I suspected that if we continued to escape, Lu Jinyang would use this spell to continue chasing us. After pondering for a while, I clenched my teeth. Since I didn't escape, I wouldn't change my way of thinking and destroy Lu Jinyang's teleportation array. Even though the three of us combined weren't Lu Jinyang's match, he hadn't arrived yet. We only wanted to destroy his teleportation array, so we might still be able to fight him. After making my decision, I immediately said to the fatty and Lu Ruxu, "It's not a good idea to continue chasing him. Lu Jinyang obviously hasn't arrived yet. Why don't we try to destroy the black flames? I reckon that Lu Jinyang relied on it to chase us. As long as we destroy it, he shouldn't be able to chase us anymore." The fatty had always followed my lead. After hearing my words, he immediately nodded. Lu Ruxu also didn't have any objections and nodded. I see that there's a strange spatial power in the black flames. It should be the method that Lu surnamed used to pass through here. It would be good to study it. Since the two of us didn't have any objections, we came to an agreement. We turned around and walked towards the black flame. Lu Jinyang's figure was bathed in the black flames. Although he hadn't arrived yet, his shadow reacted when he saw us turn around. He roared at me. "Where's the item?" "Zhou, where are my things?" "Things?" His word surprised me. Subconsciously, I thought that he was referring to the second volume of the Death Scripture. But then again, Lu Jinyang had come here for the complete inheritance of Chiyu, not the second volume of the Death Scripture. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but feel puzzled. Logically speaking, Lu Jinyang had sacrificed many things in order to obtain Chiyu's inheritance. He had even given up his ranking on the Heavenly Grand Ritual. So, why didn't he immediately go to the Holy Mountain to find Chiyo's inheritance after coming out of the 10 terminal formation? Instead, he used this secret technique to chase after me. I had indeed obtained the second volume of the Death Scripture, but I hadn't paid any attention to Chiyo's inheritance along the way. Wasn't Lu Xingyang neglecting the essentials to chase after me? With this question in mind, I lifted my head and said to Lu Xingyang's shadow, "You came here for Chiyo's inheritance. I didn't stop you from obtaining it. Why did you come to me for it?" Hearing what I said, even though Lu Xingyang's face was hidden under the mask, he was still enraged. He said to me sternly, after I came out of the 10 terminal formation, the cave on the Holy Mountain was completely destroyed. I couldn't enter it anymore. You were the only one who entered the cave. If I didn't look for you, who else could I look for? You must have stolen the inheritance. His words stunned me. After being stunned for a while, I turned to ask Lu Ruxu softly, "You destroyed the cave?" Lu Ruxu still had an indifferent expression as she nodded. I activated the mechanism in the cave, so the cave was naturally destroyed. Hearing what he said, I couldn't help but cry and laugh. No wonder Lu Xingyang had used such a secret technique to chase after me. No wonder he was so angry. In order to obtain Chiyo's inheritance, he had sacrificed so many things and experienced brutality along the way. Finally, he had entered this place, only to discover that Chiyo's inheritance had disappeared. If it were me, I would also go crazy. I remained silent as Lu Xingyang's shadow continued to speak in a cold voice. "Zhou Yi, although we have a blood feud, we had an agreement on this trip to Zhuolu. I helped you in Wangwu Grotto Heaven get first place in the All-Heaven competition, and you helped me obtain the inheritance here. I did as I promised, but you went back on your word and stole Chiyo's inheritance. You put me in such a situation. You're really shameless." I never expected that Lu Xingyang would say the word shameless to me. What was even more unexpected was that I couldn't refute him. What he said wasn't wrong. We did have an agreement on this matter, and he did fulfill his promise. However, the crux of the problem was that I was wrongly blamed. Lu Ruxu was the one who destroyed the cave, and I didn't obtain Chiyo's inheritance. I didn't even notice it. I was only focused on the second volume of the Death Scripture. That was the truth, but Lu Xingyang definitely wouldn't believe it. He was trapped in the 10 terminal formation and saw me enter the cave with his own eyes. After I came out of the 10 terminal formation, the cave was already destroyed, so he naturally blamed me for everything. After being silent for a long time, I couldn't explain, so I could only sigh. "Lu Xingyang, what you view as a treasure is nothing to me. Whether you believe it or not, I have no interest in Chiyo's inheritance, nor do I have any intention of snatching it." After saying that, I didn't care whether Lu Xingyang believed me or not, and called out to the fatty and Lu Ruxu. I pointed at the black flame and said, "We don't know what this black flame is at the moment. Time is of the essence, so the three of us will use our own methods to destroy it." Hearing that, the fatty and Lu Ruxu nodded and started their preparations. Lu Ruxu's black clothes fluttered in the wind. She didn't use any technique, but directly walked towards the black flame. On the other hand, the fatty moved his fingers and summoned the yellow river of 9 bends formation. I didn't have the time to observe their methods, so I activated the true essence in my body that had recovered more than half and prepared to use the Xianyuan sword again. No matter what the black flame was, I believed that nothing could escape from the indestructible Xianyuan sword. As long as I destroyed the black flame, Lu Xingyang's teleportation technique would be broken. After activating all of the true essence in my body, I opened my mouth and spat out the Xianyuan sword. It expanded in the wind and returned to its normal size. With sufficient true essence, the 5-clawed golden dragon on the sword hilt seemed to come to life. The golden shadow circled the sword a few times and let out a dragon's roar. Immediately after, a sharp aura surged from the sword. The Xianyuan sword flipped, and the tip of the sword pointed forward as it charged towards the black flame. At the same time, the fatty's yellow river of 9 bends formation was activated. A dark yellow air current wrapped around something that looked like sand and dust. It followed closely behind the Xianyuan sword and charged towards Lu Xingyang. Even though Lu Ruxu took the lead in that direction, both the Xianyuan sword and the Yellow River of Nine Bends formation were much faster than her. The two quickly overtook her and collided with the black flame that enveloped Lu Jinyang's shadow. Following the arrival of the Xianyuan sword, the black flame gave off a loud bang. The flames soared into the sky and instantly expanded several times in size. Facing the Xianyuan sword, it didn't retreat, but advanced instead. The flames that soared into the sky enveloped the Xianyuan sword, along with the power of the Yellow River of Nine Bends formation. Chapter 732. In the black fire, Lu Jinyang's body was just a shadow. His real body hadn't arrived yet, so he couldn't stop the fatty and I from attacking him. He could only watch helplessly. The anger in his eyes behind the mask became more intense. Although Lu Jinyang could not stop it, the black fire around him was not ordinary either. After the Xianyuan sword pierced into it, not only did it not destroy it in one go, but it seemed to have fallen into a mass of mud, and it instantly stopped and was in a stalemate. At the same time, the black fire expanded a bit. It didn't retreat, but advanced instead. The raging flames rolled towards the Xianyuan sword, directly wrapping it up. The Xianyuan sword was an ancient divine item, so it naturally wasn't afraid of the black fire's corrosion. However, it was my true essence that activated the Xianyuan sword, so it couldn't withstand the corrosion of the black fire. Almost in an instant, it melted by half, and the mysterious power of the black fire affected my body through the corrosion of my true essence. In an instant, I felt as if I had been thrown into an extremely corrosive solution. Stinging pain seeped into my body from every pore. After a while, the black fire completely covered the Xianyuan sword, directly cutting off the connection between me and the Xianyuan sword. I couldn't sense the Xianyuan sword within my divine sense. The Xianyuan sword was a divine item. After it had recognized its master, there was almost no possibility of it being taken away. So I didn't panic. I endured the pain in my body and constantly swept my divine sense, searching for traces of the Xianyuan sword. After a while, the Xianyuan sword reappeared in my divine sense. Although it was covered by the black fire and couldn't be seen with the naked eye, I could see it very clearly with my divine sense. At this moment, the Xianyuan sword floated motionlessly in the huge black fire. However, there were countless small sword lights appearing around it. After each sword light appeared, it directly shot into the black fire and destroyed a small part of it. The entire area around the Xianyuan sword had been cleared out. At this moment, the black fire still looked very big, but in reality, a large part of it had been hollowed out. Just as I thought, the Xianyuan sword could indeed restrain this item. No matter how magical Lu Jinyang's teleportation power was, as long as the black fire was cleared out, Lu Jinyang wouldn't be able to use this teleportation power to chase after me. The Xianyuan sword was very effective against the black fire, but it was a pity that I didn't have enough true essence to activate it. After clearing out a hole in the fire, there was no more power. Fortunately, the power of the fatty's Yellow River of Nine Bends formation had also caught up at this time. The gust of wind that carried the yellow sand was not like the Xianyuan sword, which directly pierced into the black fire. Instead, it circled around the black fire and directly wrapped it up. Even though the fatty's cultivation wasn't high, the Nine Bends Yellow River formation, the formation was extremely powerful. The formation. After the formation wrapped the formation, the black fire, the formation, and the formation. After a moment, Lu Ruxu finally arrived in front of the black fire. She stopped and stared at the black fire for a moment. She didn't use a spell or a magic artifact. Instead, she reached her hand into the black fire. I still didn't know what the black fire was, nor did I know how dangerous it was. Seeing Lu Ruxu's action, I couldn't help but worry. However, Lu Ruxu didn't seem to care. After he reached his hand into the black fire, he closed his eyes. Soon I saw the black fire move along his arm and gradually spread up to his body. When I saw this, I instinctively thought that the black fire was attacking Lu Ruxu, just like how it had attacked the Xian Yuan sword. However, I soon found that the situation was different. The black fire spread to Lu Ruxu's arm and became fainter. When it reached his shoulder, it disappeared completely. I then realized that Lu Ruxu was absorbing the black fire. With the Xian Yuan sword, the 9 Yellow River formation, and Lu Ruxu's ability to absorb the black fire, no matter how magical it couldn't endure for long. That was indeed the case. In just a moment, the black fire, which was originally as tall as 2 people, had shrunk to nearly half its original size, and the hole made by the Xian Yuan sword was a bit larger. As long as the external melting came into contact with the hole inside, the black fire would instantly dissipate. I roused my spirit and lifted my head to look at Lu Xinyan's afterimage. At this moment, his figure was so faint that I couldn't see it anymore. Only his upper body and head were left. His 2 legs couldn't be seen. However, beyond my expectation, the anger in his eyes had disappeared. What replaced it was a playful look. He didn't pay attention to the black fire and just looked at me from a distance. I didn't know why, but when I met his eyes, the excitement in my heart disappeared. What replaced it was a thick sense of anxiety. Before I could understand what was going on, Lu Xinyan's afterimage moved. He shook his body twice and lifted his feet. He directly walked out of the black fire. I was stunned and then realized that Lu Xinyan wasn't an afterimage. When the black fire was about to vanish, he finished the teleportation process and appeared in front of us. The situation was originally good, but after Lu Xinyan took that step, the tables were turned. At this moment, the true essence in my body was used up. The fatty was using all his strength to activate the 9 Yellow River formation to fight against the black fire. Only Lu Ruxu's situation was unknown. Even if his cultivation wasn't used up, in terms of power, he couldn't be Lu Xinyan's opponent. What should I do? I braced myself and didn't use the Xian Yuan sword to deal with the black fire. I waved my hand and retrieved the Xian Yuan sword. After I retrieved the Xian Yuan sword, the remaining true essence on it flowed back into my body. My dantian wasn't dry anymore. However, when my true essence was full, I still wasn't Lu Xinyan's opponent. How could this weak, true essence support me to deal with Lu Xinyan? Despair surged in my heart, but I still used the remaining true essence and took out the Xian Yuan sword. I took the initiative to attack Lu Xinyan. Lu Xinyan looked at me from a distance. It was obvious that he saw through my current state. The playful look in his eyes became thicker. There was even a hint of mockery. Facing the Xian Yuan sword, he didn't take out any magic tools. He just lightly waved his sleeves, and a surge of true essence exploded. The Xian Yuan sword turned around and flew back to me. It couldn't even get close to him. After forcing the Xian Yuan sword back, Lu Xinyan stood in midair and leisurely walked towards me. His steps looked slow, but in reality, he was extremely fast. Almost at the same time that the Xian Yuan sword returned, he appeared in front of me. He looked at me with a pair of cold eyes and said, "You and I have an irreconcilable grudge. This time, I gave up everything in exchange for you to help me. I was naive, but I can't blame you for going back on your word. However, since you went back on your word, you must be prepared to bear the consequences." He didn't ask me about the Qi Yu inheritance. After saying that, he raised his right hand, and the Qi Yu battle axe appeared in his hand. Lu Xinyan coldly looked at me, and the Qi Yu battle axe in his hand chopped down. Even if I was at my peak, I wouldn't be able to withstand Lu Xinyan's furious attack, let alone now. In that instant, countless thoughts flashed through my mind. However, under the absolute suppression of power, I couldn't do anything. I could only watch as the blood-red axe approached me. Just as I was about to close my eyes, my body was suddenly hit. I immediately heard the fatty's voice. "Third baby, get out of the way." Following this voice, before I could react, my body was knocked to the side, while the fatty appeared where I was previously. He didn't make any movements and only lifted his head to stare at the blood-red axe. In his eyes, the sun and moon appeared. Lu Xinyan didn't know what kind of mystique the fatty was using, but his cultivation was far inferior to Lu Jinyang's. The Qiyu battle axe wasn't obstructed at all. It still maintained its lightning speed and chopped down at the fatty's head. Just as the blade of the axe was about to touch Fatty's body, a mass of grayish-black light suddenly appeared. Then, Fatty's figure disappeared, and that mass of grayish-black light replaced Fatty's body, fiercely colliding with the Qiyu axe. Chapter 733. Looking at this scene, I was dumbfounded. Although the demon refining gourd wasn't as powerful as a Xinyuan sword, it was still one of the 10 great ancient divine weapons. In comparison, the Qiyu axe was slightly inferior. But who would have thought that the demon refining gourd would shatter under Lu Jinyang's axe? How is this possible? Besides the demon refining gourd, I was more worried about the fatty's safety. Before Lu Jinyang had destroyed the demon refining gourd, the fatty's figure had disappeared. He should have entered the demon refining gourd. Perhaps the fatty had sensed that the situation wasn't good and had activated the demon refining gourd's power. Or, at the critical moment, the demon refining gourd's spirit had appeared to save him and helped him escape. But now that the demon refining gourd had shattered, what had happened to the fatty inside? Had he encountered danger like the demon refining gourd, or had he saved his life? I had no idea. On Lu Jinyang's side, after shattering the monster refining gourd, he stopped and looked at me with a playful look in his eyes. He said calmly, "Saving you at this time? What an idiot. I want to see who can save you now." As soon as he said that, he raised the Qiyu axe in his hand and casually swung it. A bloodlight shot towards me. Before I could react, Lu Ruxu, who wasn't far from Lu Jinyang, suddenly moved. She took a deep breath, and her body expanded as though she was being inflated. Her body swelled up several times in size. In the process of enlarging, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the crimson light. I had never heard of Lu Ruxu's divine power. However, with his identity as the Taoist of Mount Longhu and having cultivated in the Qiyu tomb for 100 years, his cultivation and knowledge were naturally extraordinary. With just his bare hands, he grabbed the bloodlight and rubbed it between his hands. The bloodlight disappeared without a trace. I had never thought that Lu Ruxu would be able to break Lu Jinyang's move so casually. Seeing this, the anger in Lu Jinyang's eyes rose again. He didn't say anything, and after a cold snort, he swung the Qiyu axe in his hand once again. Because Lu Ruxu was very close to him, Lu Jinyang didn't activate the bloody glow this time. Instead, he swung the Qiyu axe directly at Lu Ruxu's head. The enlarged Lu Ruxu didn't seem to have any other tricks up her sleeves. Facing Lu Jinyang's furious attack, she actually did the exact same thing as before. She raised her hands again and met the Qiyu axe head-on. I could understand how a pair of palms could block Lu Jinyang's bloodlight, but how could they block Lu Jinyang's Qiyu axe? The reality was as I had expected. After the Qiyu axe came into contact with Lu Ruxu's palm, the downward swing was only slightly hindered before it continued to cleave downwards. In the blink of an eye, the huge blood-colored axe slashed down from Lu Ruxu's head, cleaving her body into two. I panicked. Wu Yue had asked me to bring Lu Ruxu out of the Qiyu tomb. Who knew that he would get into trouble here as soon as they left? How could I explain this to Wu Yue later? Just as I thought about it, I smiled wryly. I wasn't sure if I could survive this, so why should I worry about my promise to Wu Yue? If no one could stop Lu Jinyang, I probably wouldn't have the chance to see Wu Yue again. While I was thinking about this, Lu Ruxu's body that had been cleaved in half was like a deflated balloon, shrinking back to its original size. Then, the two halves of his body turned into a mass of gray mist. After swimming on the ground for a while, they gathered together and returned to Lu Ruxu's appearance. After all, he was a Yin spirit, so it wasn't inconceivable for him to recover. However, after recovering, his body was much fainter than before, leaving behind only a hazy shadow. Not to mention Lu Jinyang attacking him again. Even a gust of wind could blow him away. Lu Jinyang coldly snorted and moved his gaze away from him. He didn't attack him again, but turned to look at me. It seemed that Lu Ruxu's actions had completely infuriated him. This time, Lu Jinyang didn't say anything. Instead, he gripped the Chiyu axe and walked towards me. His body was really small, and it looked strange against the huge Chiyu axe in his hand. However, at the same time, his body seemed to weigh 500 kilograms. Every step he took gave off the sound of a giant stomping on the ground. It was so heavy that it felt like he was stepping on my chest. Seeing him get closer, I exhaled. My heart was filled with despair. The fatty and Lu Ruxu couldn't stop him. At this moment, I had used up all of my energy. What could I use to stop Lu Jinyang? The 8 words that the fatty had read for me were still vivid in my mind. Encountering Yang brings danger. Encountering Yin brings protection. I didn't know where the second half of the sentence had come true, but the first half was right. In the end, I was forced into this situation by Lu Jinyang. Encountering Yin brings protection. Until now, I had already met Wu Yu and Lu Ruxu. They both had Yin soul bodies, but where was the so-called encountering Yin brings protection? Who was it going to happen to? While I was thinking about this, Lu Jinyang had already walked in front of me. He looked at me in silence for a few seconds, as though he was bidding farewell to me. After a few seconds, his arm moved slightly, and he slowly raised the Chiyu axe. At this moment, the sound of a war drum suddenly resounded. It was extremely loud, as though it was reverberating in our ears. Every beat made me shiver, and my blood boiled. Hearing this sound, Lu Jinyang and I were stunned. It was the sound of the Jili war drum. Previously, when we had activated Chiyo's inheritance in Chiyo's shoulder mound, it was this war drum that had sounded first. After staying silent for a while, Lu Jinyang's hoarse and suspicious voice resounded. Chiyo's inheritance? You didn't take Chiyo's inheritance? Of course, I didn't take Chiyo's inheritance, but I didn't expect that we had already walked out of Chiyo's tomb and had started the inheritance. No matter what, at the very least, Lu Jinyang had stopped attacking me. For this inheritance, Lu Jinyang had given up too many things. When he heard the sound of the inheritance being activated, how could he care about me? He immediately turned around to look for the source of the war drum sound. While he was turning his head, I subconsciously wanted to run away. However, Lu Jinyang was right next to me. Just now, his aura had locked onto me. Under the suppression of his aura, I couldn't even move my body, let alone run away. I could only stand on the spot and follow Lu Jinyang's gaze in the direction of the Jili war drum sound. The sound of the Jili war drum was extremely loud, and its source was very clear. It was in the darkness, not far from us. I didn't know if it was coming from this dark space or from Chiyo's tomb. Although the sound of the war drum was very oppressive, it was getting louder and louder. It was different from the previous time when it had come from Chiyo's tomb. This time, the sound of the war drum seemed to be moving towards us. Lu Jinyang obviously heard that something was wrong. Just as he was about to take a step forward, he instantly stopped and stood on the spot. It seemed that he didn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand, and I naturally didn't understand either. Thus, the two of us stood on the spot in a daze, listening to the sound of the war drum that was getting closer and closer. Our gazes were fixed on the darkness behind us. After an unknown period of time, when the sound of the war drum was so strong that it seemed to be beating next to us, it suddenly stopped. As the sound stopped, Lu Jinyang and I abruptly opened our eyes wide. We didn't know when, but a figure suddenly appeared in the darkness that we were staring at. The silhouette looked very young as he stood in the darkness. From his expression, he seemed to be extremely old. After looking at us for a while, he clasped his hands behind his back and slowly walked towards us with a doddering look. His footsteps looked very slow, neither fast nor slow, but his speed was extremely fast. In 1 second, he was still in the darkness, but in the next, he had directly walked in front of Lu Jinyang and me. When I was far away, I could only see his silhouette and couldn't see his appearance clearly. However, when I was in front of him, I could finally see his appearance clearly. Instantly, I opened my eyes wide and my face was filled with disbelief. Chapter 734. As soon as that figure appeared, I recognized him. When he said those words to Lu Jinyang, I was so shocked that I couldn't utter a word. Because this person is the corpse demon I found in the corpse insect back then. To be more precise, it was the evil sacrificial spirit that had possessed the corpse demon. I had asked him many times about the identity of the evil sacrificial spirit, but he didn't answer me. I had guessed it, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't believe that he was the ancient god of war, Qiyu. According to what I had seen in the underground cellar in Shenzhen, the evil sacrificial spirit was a sacrificial spirit from the Shang dynasty. One Tianxiang had summoned him from the Nine Serenities. Qiyu had been defeated in the Battle of Zhuolu in ancient times. The Yellow Emperor had split his body in two places. How could they be the same person? I looked at the evil, sacrificial spirit in bewilderment. I couldn't figure it out. He didn't pay attention to me and just gazed at Lu Jinyang. He reached out his hand and grabbed Lu Jinyang's Qiyu war axe. He looked as if he hadn't seen the Qiyu war axe for a long time. His right hand stroked the axe, and his eyes were filled with an indescribable emotion. After a long time, he lifted his head. His eyes became cold again. He raised the Qiyu war axe and slashed at Lu Jinyang. At this moment, Lu Jinyang was still immersed in the shock of Qiyu's appearance. But when he saw Qiyu's actions, he obviously sensed danger and was prepared to dodge this attack. But he was still a step too late in the end. A blood-red shadow streaked across the pitch-black sky, and then a crisp sound rang out in his ears. Lu Jinyang's right hand had actually been chopped off. This is how you use this axe. The evil sacrificial spirit's short body stood there like a towering mountain. He raised the Qiyu war axe again and placed it on Lu Jinyang's head, forcing him to kneel on the ground. Then, he looked down at him and said faintly. Lu Jinyang had been to the Shang dynasty's royal tomb, but he had never seen the evil sacrificial spirit. He didn't know the evil sacrificial spirit's identity. He just knelt there, bewildered and bewildered. He lifted his head to look at the evil sacrificial spirit. He didn't understand why Qiyu, who had left him the inheritance, would attack him. I was equally baffled by this question. Considering the relationship between the sacrificial evil spirit and me, the inheritance he left behind should have been given to me. Why did he give it to Lu Jinyang? After passing the inheritance to Lu Jinyang could be considered as his disciple. Why would he cut off Lu Jinyang's right hand? While I was pondering this question, the evil sacrificial spirit lowered his head to look at Lu Jinyang. He coldly said, "Since you've received the first half of my inheritance and you've appeared here today, it can be considered fate. This old man has also given you the second half of the inheritance." After saying that, he extended his hand and grabbed Lu Jinyang's collar before tossing him into the empty space behind us. He then continued, "This old man's second half of the inheritance is in there. If you can comprehend it within a year, stay here and be this old man's successor. If you can't comprehend it, then stay." The ghost generals outside are still lacking the supervising ghost marshals. I wasn't sure if Lu Jinyang heard him or not. After he was tossed into the dark void, his figure instantly disappeared without a trace. Only a mournful shriek reverberated in the surroundings. After Lu Jinyang disappeared, the evil sacrificial spirit turned to look at the axe in his hand. It was as though he was disgusted that Lu Jinyang had used it before. He tossed it behind him into the void. Then, he turned to me and said, "All right, let's go." At this moment, I was still immersed in the shock of the evil sacrificial spirit's identity. I didn't react and just stood there. The evil sacrificial spirit turned to look at me. "What? Don't you recognize me?" After saying that, he didn't wait for my reply. He grabbed my collar and walked out. The evil sacrificial spirit finally stopped when we were about 100 meters away from the dark void. I had also recovered from my shock. After he put me down, I asked him, "How could you be Qiyu?" This was the biggest question in my mind. Moreover, I had a good relationship with him, so I didn't hesitate and asked him directly, "Why can't I be Qiyu?" The evil sacrificial spirit glanced at me. His tone was still calm. After asking the question, he told me everything. After the battle at Zhuolu, The Yellow Emperor had divided Qi Yu into pieces and buried him. He didn't just want to dismember his body, but he wanted to use the natural terrain of Zhuolu and Jui to seal Qi Yu completely so that he would never be able to escape. His plan was perfect. However, before the battle at Zhuolu, Qi Yu, or rather, Monster Emperor Jun, had predicted what would happen next. He had made two preparations. On one hand, he had organized an army to let Qi Yu fight against the Yellow Emperor. On the other hand, he had found the place where the Yellow Emperor wanted to seal Qi Yu in Zhuolu and Jui. He had set up some things in advance to break the formation that the Yellow Emperor had set up. That way, even if they failed the battle, Qi Yu could escape from the Yellow Emperor's seal. Similar to the Yellow Emperor's plan, although the demon god Ling was more intelligent than others, he still underestimated the Yellow Emperor's power. This resulted in Qi Yu being severely injured after he was sealed. A part of his soul fell into the 9 underworlds and was unable to escape. Thousands of years passed, but Qi Yu was still unable to wake up. It was not until the end of the Song dynasty, when Prime Minister Wen made a last-ditch effort for the fate of the country, that part of Qi Yu's soul was accidentally summoned from the 9 serenities. At that time, Minister Wen had no choice but to do so. Although he did not know that the Yin spirit that was summoned was Qi Yu, he knew that it was not a good spirit. Hence, he used his supreme mana to imprison Qi Yu's soul. After performing the Tai Sui dragon transformation ritual, he sealed it again. Later on, when the fruit farmer Yu Fuda accidentally dug out the cellar, the power of the sacrificial evil spirit's soul leaked out. Yu Fuda was bewitched by it. He killed many people and used the ritual of blood sacrifice to finally release it completely. After the part of Qi Yu's soul, which was the evil sacrificial spirit, woke up, he didn't search for his other soul. Instead, he searched for Monster Emperor Jun and the situation of the entire demon race. After that, we met in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum. At that time, he went to search for Monster Emperor Jun. He naturally didn't find Monster Emperor Jun in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum, but he found important information and confirmed my identity. After that, we went to the corpse sect together. On one hand, we were chased by the people of Dragon Tiger Mountain, and on the other hand, the evil sacrificial spirit wanted to find out about Monster Emperor Jun and the demon race. After a long time, he finally started to search for all his soul and went to the tombs of Ju Yi and Zhuolu. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if it was the will of the heavens, but during these 2 points of time, I went to the 2 tombs of Qi Yu for various reasons. Previously, when I was in Qi Yu's shoulder tomb in Ju Yi, the evil sacrificial spirit was also there, but he didn't show up. This time, he didn't want to show up, but he realized that my life was in danger, so he had to show up. As for his soul, he had successfully repaired it after these 2 trips, but he couldn't completely fuse with it within a short period of time. Once it was completely fused, his power wouldn't be too far off, although he wouldn't be able to recover to his peak. After listening to him, I couldn't help but take a deep breath. On one hand, I was surprised by their thousands of years of scheming. On the other hand, I was surprised by the power of the evil sacrificial spirit, Qi Yu. That year, when he had just woken up in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum, he had displayed extraordinary power. Even if the heavenly masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain and the Metaphysics Association joined hands, they couldn't last more than a few rounds against him. In the end, all of their souls were destroyed. And now, he had completely suppressed Lu Jinyang. This was already a terrifying strength, but it was only half of his soul. Once his soul was completely fused, who in this world would be able to go against him? While I was shocked, I finally understood what the evil sacrificial spirit had done previously. I understood why he said that he would never harm me. However, there was one thing that I couldn't understand. Since he believed that I was Monster Emperor Jun and stood on my side, why did he allow Lu Jinyang to inherit his inheritance? Lu Jinyang was my archenemy. The evil sacrificial spirit definitely knew that. From what he had done, he should have helped me kill Lu Jinyang. There was no reason for him to let Lu Jinyang inherit his inheritance. As I was thinking about this, the evil sacrificial spirit took the initiative to talk about his inheritance before I could ask. According to what he said, according to his and Monster Emperor June's plan, he would successfully revive in his tomb. Hence, before he died, he sealed all of his equipment and some of his true essence in the two tombs. That way, he would be able to recover his power at the fastest speed after he woke up. However, things changed. When he woke up again, thousands of years had passed. Everything was completely different. Hence, the things that he and Monster Emperor June had prepared became Chi Yu's inheritance that everyone wanted. After he finished speaking, I couldn't help but ask him why he allowed Lu Xingyang to inherit his inheritance, even though he knew about the grudge between me and him. Chapter 735. The evil sacrificial spirit's words made me speechless. In my eyes, Lu Xingyang was my archenemy, but in his eyes, Lu Xingyang was just a nobody who had inherited his inheritance. He could kill him easily. That was why he didn't care. After a moment of silence, I didn't say anything. In the evil sacrificial spirit's mind, the revival of the monster race was his biggest hope. If he could use Lu Xingyang, he wouldn't be willing to kill him. Although he was good to me, I couldn't be arrogant. Lu Xingyang, I had to do it myself. After thinking it through, I didn't mention Lu Xingyang anymore and turned to look behind me. When Lu Xingyang had attacked me, the fatty had used his body to block the attack. Lu Xingyang's Chi Yu axe had smashed the monster refining gourd together with him. According to my speculation, the fatty had been sucked into the monster refining gourd when he was in danger. However, the monster refining gourd had been smashed, and I didn't know how the fatty was doing. Seeing that I was looking into the distance in silence, the evil sacrificial spirit asked me about it. I told him all of my worries and asked him to wait for a moment. I quickly returned to the place where Lu Xingyang and I had just fought. I began to search carefully. After the battle, just now, the mountain walls were cracked and countless rocks were flying everywhere. I searched inch by inch and turned over the rocks on the ground, but I didn't find any trace of the devil refining gourd. It seemed that there wasn't even a single piece of the broken devil refining gourd left. According to my estimation, the monster refining gourd had its own space. Even if it had been destroyed, the space inside wouldn't be a problem. However, I couldn't find a single piece of the monster refining gourd. At this moment, the evil sacrificial spirit followed me. Seeing my anxious face, he said, "The monster refining gourd is a divine tool. It won't be destroyed easily. Get out of the way." My eyes brightened when I heard him. Right, the monster refining gourd and the Chi Yu axe belonged to him. No one could be more familiar with them than him. Why didn't I think of that? I hurriedly dodged to the side. The evil priest nodded and didn't say anything else. He lifted his leg and walked a circle around the place where Lu Xingyang and I had fought. In the end, he stood at the spot where I had been standing. He raised his hands, right palm up and left palm down, as though he was hugging Tai Chi. A white mist instantly appeared between his hands. As he moved, the mist gradually expanded. After a few breaths, he didn't seem to make any movements, but the white mist between his hands suddenly dispersed and spread out in all directions. Soon after, within a radius of a dozen meters, the rubble and debris on the ground all rose into the air. Soon after, it fell to the ground again, but there were some tiny particles that remained, still floating in the air. After all the debris fell to the ground, the tiny particles gathered together under the influence of the white mist, forming a bronze ball. The evil priest waved his hands, and the bronze ball flew into his hands. After doing this, the evil sacrificial spirit extended his hand and placed the bronze ball in front of me. "This is the monster refining gourd." I was stunned and quickly asked, "How did it become like this? Will the space inside be affected? Will the people inside be able to survive?" The evil priest shook his head. "In this world, the strongest power is the passage of time. Even an ancient divine tool can't withstand the ravages of time. My axe, in terms of quality, can't be compared to the monster refining gourd. However, after Lu Xingyang obtained it, he nourished it for a period of time and recovered its previous power. However, the monster refining gourd hasn't been nourished. The power of thousands of years has weakened it to an extremely weak state. That's why it was destroyed by the axe. However, you don't need to worry. The divine tool has its own magical powers. Even if it's damaged, the space inside won't be affected. The people inside will be fine too. After listening to him for a long time, I finally relaxed after hearing the last two sentences. As long as the fatty was fine, everything was fine. After exhaling in relief, the evil priest rubbed the monster refining gourd between his hands. The bronze ball instantly reverted to its original appearance. Then, he threw the monster refining gourd to me. After I caught it, the evil priest continued, "From the extent of the damage, it will take 1.5 years to recover before it can be used again. Take it first. When the fatty wakes up, give it to him." Since the fatty was fine, even if the monster refining gourd couldn't be used anymore, I wasn't worried. However, after hearing the second half of the evil priest's sentence, I was bewildered. The fatty was the current owner of the monster refining gourd, but the monster refining gourd was Chio's item. The evil priest had already woken up. Why didn't he take back this divine tool? Why did he still give it to the fatty? I asked the evil priest doubtfully. He said, "First, he got it from my grave, and it has already recognized him as its owner. Second," then he paused and turned to look at me. "Second, he's your friend, and the monster refining gourd is a gift from you. How can I take it back?" Listening to his words, I couldn't help but be speechless. I thought about the relationship between him and me before nodding. I didn't continue on this topic, but asked him instead, "Can you get the fatty out of there? I won't be at ease until I see him with my own eyes." The evil sacrificial spirit didn't say anything, but pointed at the monster refining pot in my hand. A 7-colored light surged out from the mouth of the pot, and the fatty's figure appeared along with the light. His fat body landed on the ground in front of me. He was still unconscious. I was worried and hurried to check his breathing. Then, I urged my true essence to enter his body to check his condition. His condition wasn't good, but it wasn't as bad as I had imagined. He had fainted because he had consumed too much true essence. As for the power of Lu Jinyang's axe, it was mainly blocked by the demon refining pot. Although the remaining power had damaged the meridians in the fatty's body, looking at his situation, as long as he woke up and recuperated for a few days, he would be fine. After confirming the fatty's condition, I finally relaxed. However, looking at the fatty's huge body, I became worried. With my cultivation, it wasn't that I couldn't move him, but it wouldn't be easy to move such a big person. In the end, I asked the evil priest to put the fatty back into the monster refining gourd. When he woke up, he would be able to control the monster refining gourd and come out. Since the fatty had already woken up, I didn't have to worry about this matter anymore. I prepared to leave, so I called for Lu Ruxu. During the battle with Lu Jinyang, he had also helped. However, after the evil priest appeared, he just stood in the distance and didn't come over. When he heard my call, he didn't say anything. His black clothes fluttered in front of me. He didn't say anything and just pointed at my chest. Immediately after, his figure disappeared. I lowered my head and saw that he was pointing at the Xiang Lu leather pouch that was hanging on my waist. Combined with what had happened earlier, I understood that he had entered the second volume of the Death Scripture. After settling everything, I prepared to leave. However, the evil sacrificial spirit stared at the place where Lu Ruxu had disappeared with a pensive gaze. I was stunned. Just as I was about to thank him for helping me obtain the second half of the Death Scripture, he waved his hand and pointed at the empty space behind him that had been created by the 10-terminal formation. "Don't be in a hurry to leave. Come with me to study that formation." After saying that, he turned around and left. I was stunned. According to what he had said, the things in the tomb were set up by him and Monster Emperor Jun. What was there to study about the things that they had set up themselves? Seeing that he had already walked over, I quickly followed him. When we reached the empty space, I prepared to walk over and stand next to the evil sacrificial spirit. However, he pushed me back and said solemnly, "Be careful. Stand back. It's very dangerous here." I was even more confused, so I asked him about my previous doubts. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.